Hello, friend. Season
4.
The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from a high desert encampment on the frontier of our agrarian hoplite republic. This is a variety program for happy warriors who are getting some seriously bad vibes from the deranged post-Christian technocracy. Grab a tankard of yak's milk and join us by the campfire as Sumo and Cavi return to shake your surveillance, expel your parasites, and generally have a good time. Are you ready? Stand by.
Mystical American Patriot Society, now available in 3 dimensions.
Hey, Sumo.
Whoa! Oh, I didn't see you there, Cavi. I see you've brought listeners. And sorry, I was so involved I didn't see you approaching. I'm sorry, listener. Sorry, Cavi. How are you doing today?
Doing good.
I'm glad you stopped by. I was just fiddling with a song. I'll play it for you real quickly. I don't know if I actually know how to play it yet, but I'll go anyway. I'm gonna play it a different way than it was recorded. Cold late night, so long ago, when I was not so young, you know. Pretty man came to me, never seen eyes so blue. I could not run away, it seemed. We'd seen each other in a dream. Seemed like he knew me, he looked right through me. Yeah. Come on home, girl, he said with a smile. You don't have to love me yet, but get high for a while. But try to understand. Try to understand. Try understand. He's a magic man. We have an interview with a magic man, a guy who has performed himself miraculous. I mean, he would God perform through him. He would say miraculous faith healings. Also a fellow who does some other arguably supernatural things. Also a fellow who does arguably. Now, of course, this is all self-reported. I can't prove it to you. But by some stretches of some imaginations, he could be considered a magic man. Also, I think the son of a preacher man, if I remember our interview correctly. So it's 2 different kinds of songs from the 60s and 70s. which is him, a magic man and the son of a preacher man. And he's the only one that could ever reach me. He's the son of a preacher man. How are you today, Cavi?
Doing good.
Excellent. Are you smelling under your armpits there? You're washing.
I was trying to salute you and be like, yes.
Oh, right.
But I'm
yes.
not great with these short limbs.
Well, that's one of the downfalls of, I look at my dog all the time and I say, you would be so much better off if you had hands instead of paws.
Yes.
But whatever. How are you today, Cavi? What should we discuss before we jump into our interview with our wonderful new friend, Zack?
Okay. So somebody brought up, I think it might have even been you on the Telegram channel, was Noah's flood a universal flood? And then
that's a good question.
I was like, I want to comment. Yeah, I was like, I want to comment on that, but I'm also really lazy and I don't want to type a giant response on my phone.
Please do. Was Noah's flood a worldwide flood or not? Cavi, the biblical expert of this channel, shall pontificate.
Okay, so you got to read stuff in the Bible like this, sort of in the mindset of the people back at the time when it was written. And back then, like today, people tend to see things in terms of good versus evil, whereas back then, people saw things more in terms of chaos versus order. And the concept of primordial chaos was like a big idea for them. Primordial chaos, or the abyss. If you go all the way back to the start of Genesis, you have, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, period. And then you have, but the earth had become formless and void, and the face of God brooded over the waters. I'm going to mute myself off for a second there.
It's fine.
So the had become part is very interesting, and there's a whole thing called the gap theory, which is another whole topic. But something happened, and everything was basically primordial chaos, or the abyss, and that's symbolized by water. And the first thing God does at the beginning of the creation is he separates the waters above and below and makes a dry land appear in the middle. And then he goes and through all that, he does the 6 days of creation and creates everything. During Noah's flood, you have both rain coming from above, and you also have the fountains of the deep breaking open from below. So what's happening here is God is basically undoing all of creation by bringing the waters above and the waters below back together in the middle to basically wipe everything out. And then after 40 days, everything kind of recedes and creation begins anew again. So, I think it's not only like an earthly flood, whatever the earth is, however your cosmology works out, but I think God basically undid all of creation, kind of started over, wiped everything out.
Right. Now, at the beginning, you said had become. Go into that a little bit more.
So, most Bible translations say something like the earth was formless and void.
Right.
But that is weird. And a bunch of people way smarter than me claim that when you translate it from the original, it's actually the earth had become formless and void, which seems to suggest something happened between, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, but everything had become formless and void. So there's the name for that is called the gap theory. And there's the idea is that like there was some kind of whole civilization before then that got wiped out and everything destroyed somehow. Or some people think that, this gives you millions of years for evolution, but that doesn't really work because that happens before the 6 days of creation. So you can throw that idea out. But nobody really knows what happened, and it's very weird.
Yeah, I thought you brought that up. I don't think we've talked about that on the show, gap theory, but it's interesting because it explains a couple of things. One, after God makes a promise to Noah that he says, "I won't destroy the earth with water again." It kind of sounds like it's become habitual at this point. You know what I mean? Like it's like, okay, that was too many times. Like it's a little bit. You get the feeling that it's more than once. Do you get that feeling, Cavi? He stepped away.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to type notes.
Okay.
He did say, but it is worth noting that God did promise he's not going to destroy it with water again. which again, water is a symbol of primordial chaos and everything. But he is going to destroy it again with fire at some point.
Right.
So look forward to that.
It's kind of, and it would fit in. It would fit in more with the intellectual soup of the time of ancient Sumer, which is very close to a Hindu cosmology of eternal cycles. If this was referring to like, hey, God created the earth, but then it destroyed again, and now it's another one, and that would account for the two creation myths that you see in Genesis 1 and 2, which people like to point out, like, oh, this was clearly cobbled together. Because, like, if there's a creation myth and then it's like, oh, but then the world was destroyed and he made it again, that's sort of an interesting idea. But had become formless and void, almost like he made it, and we're in a new cycle of an age, and the other age was washed away, kind of, which is a wild idea. Even more wild, but we're already talking about wild ideas on the show. What do you think about that? Where do you stand on gap theory?
I think something definitely happened, but I don't really know what. And as far as I know, we probably will never really know because it was before our cycle.
Well, I think there are some things that make a little bit more sense in the biblical story if you take that. But again, it probably makes more problems than it solves.
Well, so here's some more questions too then to think about. The Bible says that like the angels shouted for joy when God created the earth. So that would imply that the angels were created before that point.
Right.
So were they from the previous civilization? And then the other question is when did Lucifer fall? Because did he fall before the 6 days of creation or sometime after or what?
And was the first flood, if again going on this theory that the waters covering the earth you see in Genesis 1 is the flood of a previous destruction. There was something before, another universe, if you will. Was that the flood that was sent to wipe out Lucifer, whatever that means? Lucifer, like, I don't know. But here's a thought. Does that explain? Here's why I said it. It does answer some questions, but it makes more problems, I think. Adam and Eve are created. There's their children. Where do they get their wives from? Well, some people survived the first flood. Maybe their wives out in the land of Nod were the survivors of the last one. I don't know. It's an idea.
This one never really bothered me this much. I figured it was just their siblings. At that point, you didn't have to worry about inbreeding because the human DNA was like completely perfect.
Yeah.
So, and there's no social stigma about that either yet at this point.
Right. But he does seem to go out. When Cain is cast out, he goes to Nod and he founds a city. That seems like more than a few people. I don't know. But it's just something to think about.
How many years passed though? Because these people are living to be like almost 1,000 years old, right? And you can have a lot of kids and they can have a lot of kids and you can exponentially get a pretty large population pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's all kinds of explanations, and I'm not wedded to gap theory by any means, but it is an interesting thought experiment. Like, if it is had become, if that is the most literal translation of the oldest one we have, that's an interesting turn of phrase. It's not that it was; it's that it had become, and that's interesting. I think it maybe makes God's actions, and it fills in a little bit like it's like a hidden backstory to like this whole war in heaven thing that we just get privy to. But like something terrible happened way back,
It's important too to understand the concept of the waters being chaos, because you have that mentioned in other places in the Bible. Like at the end of the world, they talk about there's going to be no more sea. Well, that means there's going to be no more of this chaos. It's all going to be order, and it's all going to be like the perfect universe kind of thing.
Right. And I hope that's a symbolic sea because I kind of like the ocean personally. I hope it doesn't go away. But, oh well. Today we have an interview in our continuing series of normal people with paranormal supernatural experiences so that it's not just me and other podcasters talking about it. I have an interview with the, let's call him, what's a good adjective? Illustrious? What's another word like illustrious? Illustrious, magnificent,
Transcendent.
glorious. What?
Transcendent.
The transcendent Zack Grafman. He's a friend of Zack. Not Zack. My head is just everywhere. He's a friend of Brady, from the show we did with Brady. Do you remember that one?
You got to tell me a little bit more.
Okay. Oh, Kevy. You remember the show I was on? Like, anyway, they're old friends. They're old friends with, yeah.
What do
you remember Frank and Brady, the Frank and Brady show?
Oh, yes. That was recent.
Did we? Now I'm all confused. Did we put that on this one? This has got my mind going. The Frank and Brady show. Anyway, he's a friend of Frank. And I think, a friend of Brady. I think he's also a friend of Frank. He's a friend of one of them, and maybe both. I don't remember what he said offhand. Maybe both of them. Let's just go with both. They're both very friendly people. He should be friends with both if he's not. He's from the Frank and Brady show, and he heard me talk on their show, which is also our show. This is why it's so confusing. Everything is everything. And started following me, and I put out this call for people. And again, if you, listener, have had a paranormal or supernatural experience you would like to share, please contact us. Send in the email. Let's get you on, because I think this has been very fruitful for me personally. Anyway, but he contacted me and said, "I've got some things." And he is Zack is a guy who's in the most charismatic of charismatic movements. Have you heard of the Jesus movement, Gabby?
I believe I'm familiar with charismatic stuff.
That was the hippies.
It's been a long time ago.
Yeah, the hippies, when the hippies found Jesus, that was the Jesus movement, more or less.
I've been to some charismatic churches way back in the day.
Yeah. And he talks about all kinds of crazy and what if I told you this, Kevy? What if I told you that he has stories of direct faith healings, people speaking in tongues, and what if I told you this? What if I told you that he had seen with his own two eyes Jeffrey Epstein in a black cape running down a gorge in the early morning hours of New Mexico? What if I told you that? If I told you that, I know my mind was blown too. A perhaps spectral, we're not sure, a perhaps spectral Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know. That comes up. And also, we talk a good deal about C.S. Lewis because he started his own C.S. Lewis podcast, and we discussed the real C.S. Lewis, the C.S. Lewis that was probably, well, I won't spoil it at the beginning, but the C.S. Lewis that was probably a victim of sexual assault. The C.S. Lewis that had tremendous weird relationship problems. The C.S. Lewis that didn't like children, and how he shined through all of his personal problems to become someone great. We had a great conversation, a long conversation, and I hope everyone will find it as enjoyable as I did. In fact, I know you will, and in fact more, because it gets pretty wild. So everyone, enjoy this one in this next series, and I will see you next time. Until then, Sumo and Cavi, signing off. Okay, anything you want to get out of the way before we begin?
No, just hi, and thank you so much for the open call, and I hope that you're getting other people who are also interested, because it's a topic that I am, of course, just endlessly excited about. So I hope you'll get some other people to chat with you about it, because it's one of my favorites.
Yes. Well, so far I put out a call to get people to share their supernatural or paranormal experiences, and I make a distinction between the two.
I agree.
Some people don't.
I would as well.
And I've so far got a healthy response. In fact, it's going to take more than one episode to get through all the people, I believe. So I think it's going to be good. I recorded one last night with a guy named Elliot, and his stories were quite amazing, I felt.
Were they more on the supernatural or paranormal side?
Little both. Some supernatural healings and a ghost sighting, as well as just some like general coincidences. And I must say, you are yet another. All of my listeners and readers and interactors are apparently very handsome.
Oh, I appreciate you.
Another very handsome. You have a great background too. You have like a bookshelf, and it looks like it's clean.
This is 100% my beautiful wife who she found out I am starting a podcast. You've seen that I've been rabble rousing for a little bit on the stack for my new thing. So I'm starting a podcast that I'm calling Remedial Lewis, where I'm picking people who have not read stuff that I think is kind of essential Lewis canon and having them read the book, and then we talk about it on the podcast. And
Right.
I told my wife I was doing this, and she said, well, there's no place that's pretty enough looking. So she reorganized my nice bookshelf with my vintage landmarks and my cigar box and just the things that make me look like an intelligent person, which I very much appreciate.
Oh yeah, it looks great.
Yeah.
I'm envious. I record mostly on my spaceship, obviously, which I don't know if you've ever seen the show.
Yes.
Um,
Oh yes, I have. Yes. Well, you're Brady and Frank are very good internet friends.
oh good.
I'm on Substack because of the Thomas Bevan's Soaring 20s Social Club, and I met all of those guys in his original Discord in like 2021 or 2022.
Okay.
And I've been close with them ever since. We started a little spin-off project that went for a little while. I text Brady every once in a while, so we're that's kind of how.
Right. So so that's my apart from if I record on the spaceship, it's fine. If I record on Earth ever, it's like, oh, what do I do? There's the the raccoon skin cap in the way, and there's the pair of antlers, there's the old piece of a bilge, there's the all this, there's the boat motor that's just sitting in the corner. It just is terrible. So I never have any good space to but your space looks great. I love it.
Well, it's now that I'm going to do this. I will not do this on screen, but this is the difference between internet mediated reality and not. I'm going to give you a slow pan to what three children have done to the rest of the space.
Right. Yeah.
So this is you're seeing not reality,
Right.
But we'll keep internet reality for just.
But
a minute.
even your not reality is very good. It's better than my not reality or my. Well, I don't know. It's better than my best not reality I could make in my house on Earth. Because I would do that, and then I'd be midway through, and an enormous dog would jump over, and he'd be covered in seaweed or something.
Oh my goodness!
But anyway, I would like to talk to you about your paranormal supernatural experiences, and also about your C.S. Lewis project, because I'm a huge Lewis fan myself as well.
Oh, great! Well, sure, yeah. I'll just follow your lead. So whatever you want to talk about, I would love to talk about. I don't want to dive bomb what you're doing with a plug, but if you will open the bottle and let me rant, I'll just do it all night. What's the there's a quote from a that I just did recently where he says, "You've trod on my loud pedal by mistake." Yeah, and I like that because I feel like that's what everybody feels like when they get the one topic that you could just talk about forever. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, I tell you what, let's start it with the Lewis stuff.
Sure.
Let's start with Lewis, because you've taken on a project on the internet of not the tame Lewis that everyone, the real Lewis, as you put it. Because
yeah.
People have a vision of C.S. Lewis as like he's like your grandpapa or something, and he drinks tea. Maybe he's a little British gay, which is not to say homosexual, but like British. Maybe he's that.
Yeah.
But you wanted to bring out like the real Lewis. What was he actually like?
Well, can I ask you a question? Like,
sure.
Is that feel like my characterization of people's treatment of Lewis? I don't want to be mean to anyone or like mean spirited, but I certainly get the sense from. In fact, I remember I think I PM'd Ian Harbour on here, who works over at Mere Orthodoxy, which is a great. I'm not slandering anybody. Mere Orthodoxy is a really cool publication on there.
Right.
And I told him, I said, Ian, why are you guys making C.S. Lewis gay? And he started laughing because he knew exactly what I was talking about. I said, like, Ian, it's all so touchy-feely. And so, the joke I always make is it's like you've taken 5 of his quotes and you've cross-stitched them on a pillow. And that's what I feel like that's a fair characterization, right? Like it's like we've kind of neutered so much of who he was as a very odd, just unique person, a unique Christian, a unique thinker, and we've kind of sanded him down to the parts of him that your aunt wants to remember. God bless all the aunts everywhere, but and it did. It got me to I had stand all I can stands, and I can't stands no more, and I kind of had been threatening people that loved me for years and said, I'm just going to start a Substack and just yell about C.S. Lewis. And, he's probably the one author I've read the most of in my life, the person who's most influenced my thinking, my, walk with God, my way of my real like day-to-day, like spiritual experience, like how I connect with the Lord is a lot of times mediated through ideas and like thought technologies that come from him.
Sure.
And I know that makes me rants. I know that makes me very special. I'm not like other guys, right? I like C.S. Lewis. I'm different, right? But like it's something I have been passionate about, and I've put the work in. I'd like to think, and yeah, I just think that everybody. I mean, let's take even the thing that you said. You were joking about Lewis being British gay.
Yeah,
but Lewis is absolutely not a normal person in his relationships. Like not even close. No.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like just certainly. And that goes from, I taught a little class at our local co-op. Our kids go to a homeschool co-op, and I taught a class called World of CS, middle school and high school. And I told the kids at the beginning, I said, one of your moms is going to complain about me by the end of this class. And that didn't happen because the kids were all cool. But I had to explain to these kids, like, yes, he lived with a woman who was his friend. He met a man named Paddy Main, I believe was his last name, in I'm sorry, Maine is not his last name. Paddy Moore, excuse me. Met a gentleman named Paddy Moore, an Irish gentleman, in his basically boot, his drill course when he was 18 to be a second lieutenant before getting shipped off to the trenches. He becomes, acquaintances with him, or close friends, and they promise to each other, if I die, you take care of my dad, Lewis says. And Paddy says, that's fine. If I die, you take care of my mom. Lewis had already met Moore's mother, Janie Moore, who at the time was kind of like this vivacious, kind of, gregarious, older than him woman. I think she was in her 30s or 40s at the time. He's 18. And it's entirely possible that they developed a relationship of some kind, possibly romantic, at that time.
Yeah. He
goes off to the trenches, gets himself blown up by friendly fire artillery. Moore is missing, never recovered. When he comes back, he eventually kind of clandestinely moves into Janie Moore's home and lives there until her death.
Both keeping his promise, but also maybe there's a sexual element.
Well, this is what's been argued about by biographers, right? Like there's biographical war over, well, did they have a romantic relationship? If so, when was that romantic relationship? Because it's obvious that it was discontinued at some point.
Right.
In a very dramatic way, like we're not doing this anymore. And there was also great antipathy between them later on in his life, where she just became this incredibly irascible, difficult to deal with person that was really this like plague on his existence. His brother, Warren Lewis, hated Mrs. Moore, like just abhorred her because he felt that she was this drag on Lewis's life. Lewis at one point wrote that, I think during one of his most prolific periods of writing, and he may have been exaggerating, but he said that he personally believed he had never been working for more than 30 minutes at a stretch without being interrupted.
Yeah.
Which makes you sick if you write anything, because you're like, how is he doing this? It's not fair, right? So yeah, like that's an abnormal human relationship.
Sure.
For him to be, probably, I would say, from my reading biographically and stuff, I would argue, I think he was probably romantic with her for at least some period, with a woman who is easily his mother's age. I mean, his mother had passed, which is a whole nother thing. The woman that he marries later in life, again, strange circumstances, a woman who moved to England while still married to a crumbling marriage, and basically told her husband, I'm going to go and marry C.S. Lewis. Yeah. And then shows up in England and kind of sets her sights on him. He sort of doesn't know what to do with her. They end up kind of falling in love, but he marries her ostensibly for a green card marriage, and then she gets sick, and then they're really married, and they have this very brief, genuinely very sweet, 2 or 3 year marriage before she passes untimely of cancer. Again, that's odd. Like, he has no normal relationships with women.
Right.
And he's known by confession to a close friend who is homosexual, who he has a lifelong letter writing relationship with, and it was a close friend of his, Arthur Greaves. He confessed, some form of sadomasochistic,
Right.
desires or ideations or whatever, and those also bubbled out in some way at university. And again, a lot of this we're talking about him pre his conversion experience, but he was very honest post conversion experience, writing to people that he felt troubled things and they bothered his conscience and all this stuff, right? I feel like, don't you think that if we just suppress all that in our understanding of who he was, doesn't it lessen so much of how powerful and beneficial his writing is in a spiritual and devotional sense?
Yes, absolutely. I haven't been saying this, but I've been thinking it a bit in my recent criticisms about Seraphim Rose in the Orthodox community, because like he's become so popular. Like some guy was on a T-shirt, and this priest that saw the guy wear a T-shirt said, "Oh, he would not want to be on a T-shirt." It's a very like that guy would totally not want to be on a T-shirt, and right. Lewis would not want to be sanitized in this way. I don't think. I think that it messes with his message to portray him as like, I don't know, cutesier or better than he was, maybe.
Yeah, cutesy is, I think, a great word. I think he was very acquainted with his own personal badness. One of my favorite quotes about him that I found very recently is from a friend. I need to track it down and source it. But a friend, one time somebody asked about him, and he said he was a very good man who had to try very hard to be good.
Yeah.
Which is a wonderful, like, what a poignant way of describing what the Christian life is like. I mean, just like that's who, not only who he was, that's who we all should be. Like, none of us are getting an easy crack at, we have all of these constantly, the desires of the pride of life, our own personal struggles. It's not easy to do what you're supposed to do. And right. So to have, I love to, but it gives you hope to know that one of the people who I think most clearly, I would argue, in the 20th century was used of God, one of the great minds of that period, one of the most well-read men of his generation, like a kind of Renaissance man in terms of all of his interests and his studies, to know that he was a person who was a normal guy and right. who struggled, and who was not just struggled in terms of, I just want to dig up all the skeletons in his closet, because like I couldn't right. care less about that kind of behavior sometimes, but I just mean what was an average person, who was. Well,
I would say he was maybe by most people's morality standards worse than average in some ways.
Well, certainly by the standards I think most are on this. I would argue, and this is going to sound very mean-spirited, I don't mean to be this way, sure. But by the standards of the people who are most eager to do this sort of, like, I call Cozy Lewis, the Cozy Lewis industrial complex or whatever, those people are most eager to not really talk about or even acknowledge who he actually was.
Yeah.
The people who just want to read Narnia and be very excited about Narnia, which I love Narnia, but I suspect anyone who wants to cling to juvenile literature as an adult and refuses to also interact with everything else he wrote.
I agree with you. It's very strange. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, just because it's like you're an adult, and he has adult literature, and the adult literature meets you at where your life is.
Right.
And yes, I love Narnia, but I also, Out of the Silent Planet is like, will haunt me forever.
Right.
because it deals with the things that you have to worry about as an adult, of memory and regret and the brokenness of life, the world that you're called to steward and you're called to live out. And there are certain scenes in that you can't write for a kid, because they're not, a child wouldn't understand them.
Right.
And I remember, isn't it, it's Bob Jones. Bob Jones, famously of Bob Jones University, known incredibly, uptight and legalistic mecca for Christians in Florida. And Bob Jones, I think, in his day went over and visited C.S. Lewis at one point, and someone asked him what did he think of meeting Professor Lewis, and he said, that man smokes a pipe and that man drinks whiskey, but I do believe that man loves Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
And I love that, because it's like Lewis always got these spiky bits that are confronting people who want to just not acknowledge those parts of him,
I'll bring up two things. One, I always think it's funny that he's so well known for being like a children's author, and he famously did not like children, like in his personal life. He couldn't stand being around little kids. He wrote about that.
Did not like children. Very uncomfortable with them. Yes.
Yeah.
No. Right. Exactly.
And I think, well, I'll get back to them. Going on his acquaintances, are you familiar with Father Bede?
Yeah. So this is one of his.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to betray how I'm an imposter for this project, but that's okay. I just yell real loud and do the research afterwards. Bede is, if I remember correctly, was one of his students.
Correct. Yeah.
Who then converted to. Bede was also interested in like Buddhism. Is that right? Or like was into some other interesting stuff. Weird. Just kind of. I could be misremembering that last part.
So Father Bede he's an interesting man. I wrote a whole article about him a while ago. He's a fellow that had more of an impact on me than I ever realized until far after the fact. In that, this is my 3 degrees from C.S. Lewis story, basically.
Right.
Father Bede, I forget his actual name. I think it was Bernard. I don't remember. Like his before.
Yeah, it's Bede Griffiths. I think was his last name, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
So he was a student at Oxford of Lewis's. Became friends afterwards. He was a mentor. C.S. Lewis was a bit of a mentor. Mm-hmm. He converts to Catholicism from Anglicanism. Becomes a Benedictine monk. Then, when he's like 50 years old, he says, I am flying to India, and he got permission from his abbot to do this. And I'm going to start an ashram. He called it the Holy Trinity Ashram. He said, this is a Christian ashram. However, I am doing it 100% as an Indian person. And so he did his prayers in Sanskrit. He did his, or in Hindi, both of them. He got up every morning and did yoga to the sun. He wore like the orange robes. He was doing like basically a Hinduism ashram.
To what end in his mind?
To the end of, he said, he and Lewis talked about this, is he said, well, if you think about it, what we have here is sort of like a Christianity that grew out of and sort of incorporated Western paganism. And you see that elements in that, like in our cathedrals and in our holidays. He said, what if that's a barrier in the East and we just incorporate their thing? That was his idea.
Sure. Yeah.
And, okay. but he comes to me because one of the people that really had a huge, and he was actually, Father Bede actually came to Lewis's bedside while he was dying. And he was one of the last people to see him alive. Mm-hmm. But Father Bede was the guy that really set, have you heard of Rupert Sheldrake? I've talked about him many times on this show.
I've heard of Rupert Sheldrake from you, I think, but I don't have a lot of knowledge of that.
He was the guy that first set me on the idea of, well, I don't know about first, but he was early in my thinking of like, you could approach supernatural and spiritual things from an evidentiary standpoint, not just sort of elite wooey fooey, whatever. And he did all these experiments about like, he did real tests, like it's repeatable, of like phantom limb syndrome, telekinesis, all this stuff. It's very, very interesting. He's still operating. He's still doing. He developed this concept of morphogenetic fields. But anyway, he was able to do that. He was an atheist for a long time. And somehow or other, by hook or by crook, he met Father Bede or heard of him and went to meet him in India. And so, and that led to his conversion, because he said, well, this is like, I can understand religion better if it's in this like universalist sense, like that was his pathway into Jesus. Mm. And so it was it was very strange to me, because like if C.S. Lewis hadn't done C.S. Lewis, Father Bede, Rupert Sheldrake, and then if that hadn't happened, right, I would be in a very different place. But I didn't even know that connection happened for a long time.
That's really fascinating, actually. I think it's funny how small those things usually are.
Yeah.
Like I for sure.
Lewis has a whole pedigree of people that sort of follow him via completely different lineage in India through Father Bede and his sort of things. It's very, very wild.
Really?
Yeah.
That is interesting. I didn't know that. I knew that Bede was like, had different tastes than Lewis, and that was kind of like a point of conflict for them in some ways, because, similar to how he had a point of conflict with Tolkien.
Yep.
Because young Catholic you've ever met on Substack, C.S. Lewis was not a Catholic, nor was he considering being a Catholic, nor did he much like Catholics.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't know that. I think it's funny how, like you said, how not just in that connection, but how everybody kind of has their 3 degrees from Lewis. I think it's really interesting how every Christian tradition, jokes aside, like claims him in some way.
Yeah.
Or every Christian tradition, he's like the fair ground, the neutral ground. I am a Calvary. This will be important for our discussion in a minute. I'm a Calvary Chapel kid, born and raised.
Right.
I'm a dirty hippie, of dirty hippies, right? And I for him to be just as influential in my life as someone who was raised, under the shadow of an Anglican steeple somewhere, as many Catholics and many, that's a crazy. Most Christians, sometimes I think we get really, it's very hard. And I'm not an ecumenical, so I understand why it's difficult. It's very difficult for you to trust somebody that comes from a different tradition, because there's this thing of like, well, disagreement with them. Not just like, not just a bickering. Like, I don't agree about this. And these are important things. So for someone who I think was so rigorous to not step on people's toes unless he needed to, right. I think that's what made it so that we could all benefit from it. And I really appreciate that. And similar to you, I have no idea where I'd be spiritually if I hadn't found, probably like a copy of Out of the Silent Planet in Tidal Wave Books in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
I was probably one of my first books of his, which is a weird pull for a 12-year-old to start with that one. But I think I had read Narnia. My mom had read us Narnia or something. But that was my first, adult Lewis. Was
the first Lewis book I read was The Problem of Pain when I was like 12 or 13.
Wow. Whoa. That's a crazy pull.
I know. It was a very big
what
one
did
to
you
start
like
with.
As a 12-year-old?
I didn't even know I'd never heard of Narnia until I was like 25. My dad had this set of books, Lewis books. It was like Problem of Pain, the Miracles book,
right.
Absolution of Man, and maybe another.
Right.
And they were just there, and I was like, well, I'll read that. And I was like, whoa, this is getting really heavy.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But that's what got me on Lewis. And then I really didn't even know he wrote fiction for the longest time. I just thought,
This is a really common thing, is I feel like readers. I should talk about that sometime, because like it's either you've read, Narnia, and then you find out about the Ransom trilogy. Right. So somebody gives it to you in a trench coat in the alley. They're like, "Hey kid, you like Narnia, you might like this." But then there's also people who've just read Mere Christianity and Screw Tape, and that's what they know.
Yeah.
And not that either of those are bad or wrong, but it's just crazy that it was the same guy. You know what I mean? Have you read Miracles?
Yes. Yeah. It was a great one.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. I couldn't tell you much about it, honestly, but
Miracles is really interesting because I think it's like outside of maybe his actual medieval literature books, right, where you're just reading him at work. Right. I think it's the one where it's closest to his like work voice. Really? Of him like actually, to me would be my guess, right? Because he's writing in much more of, he's not trying to write in as much of a, oh shucks, I'm just a guy down the pub to talk to you about, he's much more just writing the way he would talk to somebody at Oxford. And so it's denser and it's much more, it's just a lot more going on. I remember it taking me 2 or 3 cracks at it when I originally read it. I think.
Do you think he's being a bit defensive in there too? Like, because he's staking out a claim in the supernatural at Oxford. And so I think he's having to be a little bit more like on his game against people that might criticize it.
Oh, absolutely. Because he's not talking to, I think he sees himself, I would guess, to a what would you call it? A friendly audience.
Right.
And I don't remember the chronology, but that book is either just before I would think, or just after the famous debate that he had with Elizabeth Anscombe at the Oxford Debating Society, where he, depending on who you ask, he gets savaged by Elizabeth Anscombe, which I think is silly. My understanding is that Anscombe is a Catholic and a believer and was having fun, and nobody felt that way. But just realized that he needed to brush up on some of these things, that he couldn't just throw out kind of his gambit. He needed to make sure he had his homework done.
Right.
And I don't remember whether Miracles is just before or after that, but I think it was during a time where he was realizing that, well, Oxford, this is a funny thing about it. People at Oxford did not like Lewis.
Right.
I mean, like at all.
Yeah.
Outside of his friend circle, he was really, I think there was a lot of jealousy. I know, shocking that academic people could be jealous with each other. I mean, that's crazy. But he a lot of jealousy. He was popular. He was a household name, him and Tolkien, so nobody liked them. He was a Christian, which was becoming more of a thing, kind of like a renaissance of that. But lots of people did not like that and did not thought that made him a bad academic and someone who shouldn't be listened to. So I'm sure he, and not only that, you're not just being a nice, good little tidy Christian, which is why I love the weird. Even among Christians, I think Lewis sometimes gets approached by the people who want to be respectable.
Yeah.
Like, oh, if I read Lewis, I can be very smart and see smart people can be Christian. And then you read Miracles and you're like, no, he's weird. Like he's insisting on the fact that the Christian faith is a faith that demands the acceptance of the supernatural. It will not work without that. And he's very insistent about that. And I'm sure that was also the thing. It's like he wasn't just being a good little Christian and being quiet about it. He was yelling about the impolite parts and the awkward, embarrassing parts, which is a thing that is close to I like that about him for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Like at Oxford, it's really in all of academia for a long time. It's like, okay, it's like, yeah, you go to church or whatever, but you're like, be sensible is the sort of idea. Don't believe in all the crazy, the weird stuff, and especially, in that time. I mean, I guess, when did he start at Oxford? What year? Do you know? I don't know.
It's going to be right after. I mean, my understanding is he convalesces after he gets shot up in 1918 and he gets back, and then he kind of just like takes his exam. Well, are they had this funny thing where I think he never technically took the entrance exam when he went up because they sort of waived it for returning students and he could never pass the algebra, which makes him close to my liberal arts heart. So he never could quite get it. So I think they basically waived his whatever they called it, the entrance exam, and he entered it. My understanding is right after the war.
So and then they're still heavily in the shadow,
and then started teaching.
They're still heavily in the shadow of like first wave naturalism. Like Darwin has just not been dead that long, Oh,
correct. Yes.
First wave naturalism, where like, redefining everything, basically coming up with an entire new creation myth.
Yes. Well, and not only that, but it's not just that, it's the first gut punch to the idea that, and because of all of that, because of naturalism and scientific progress and progressivism, and all of these things, we will just be able to fix it all.
Right. And
then Lewis sees, his generation just stamped into the mud, at Eris, and realizes maybe not.
Right.
And everybody, realizes, well, maybe not. Maybe we can't fix it. Maybe we've made it really bad. So there's this massive disillusion and anger and maybe nihilism would be the wrong technical term, but I think you get what I'm pointing at, right? Where it's like there's all of this sense of like, what was it even for? Like, not only is there no God probably, but if there is, he's an evil God, which I always found fascinating. That was the attitude Lewis entered the trenches with, and I argue, this is my own personal. I've not seen any biographer write a whole ton about his time in the war because he didn't write a whole ton about it.
Right.
But I personally think that I would argue, I think that was the pivotal point where he got way closer to his conversion experience than maybe he even realized.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because he doesn't have the typical no atheists in a foxhole thing.
Right.
He says that he realized in the trenches that humanity could be good. Because he entered the trenches thinking we're bad and the world is bad, and if God exists, the whole classic, the worst kind of atheist doesn't believe God exists and hates him very much for not existing. I think Lewis might have even said that, and he left saying, well, but there were people that were very good and loved me and sacrificed themselves for me, and I had camaraderie and all of these things, and there is something beautiful about the world, even though it's so terrifyingly bad.
Right.
And I think that was the nudge where he discovered that, which led him to be like, well, the problem, he called it the problem of good, that this is like, well, if it's all bad, why can I have this incredible sensation of brotherliness with these guys that I never knew before? And why did they stick their neck out for me and risk something for me and all these things?
Yeah. You can do the problem of pain in the exact reverse, and people never do that. But like, it's like, if the world is an uncaring accident going on forever for no reason, then why is there, why is there beautifulness at all? Like, life itself is a rejection of entropy.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And that's what he does. And that's what he does in, what's the book where he spends a lot of time on that? I'm blanking right now, but he talked about that a lot. And he, in one of the weirder, again, I just reread Surprised by Joy, which is a bizarre autobiography of his,
where he skips it. If I'm not mistaken, he skips his entire relationship with that woman. Is that not true?
Oh, absolutely.
He just says,
kind of lampshades it, where he skips it, but then he says, for reasons I can't talk about this, and he makes it kind of clear what he's talking about, and he skips it. He also skips. It's not an autobiography. It's him writing about his childhood.
Yeah.
For 3/4 of it. In shockingly poignant ways. I'm like almost tearing up when he's writing about, he talks about his just brutal time in the British school system. And he says the worst thing about being at boarding school wasn't the pederasty. It was that I was lonely and that people bullied me.
Yeah. And you talk about a dark thing.
What an awful, you know what I mean? Like, it's just such a broken thing to say. It was just such a dark place. And that's why I would argue he finishes his high school experience, right? He goes up to Oxford, but he can't start yet. He gets drafted, essentially, or volunteers so he won't get drafted. And he has this incredible portion in his autobiography where he writes that he had his first real experiences of genuine male camaraderie when he was kind of taken under the wing of some men in his unit, and some guys on his way up to the front took him and bought him a drink and just made him one of the guys. And he titles in the book that chapter, the whole chapter about the war. He only spends one chapter on it, and he's very terse about it, and he calls it Guns and Good Company.
Yeah.
Which is just like so opposite to the popular myth of like that war is the uncaring meat grinder. And he's like, well, I don't know. It meant something to me. Like, it was important. It's fascinating.
I agree. Who was it that said, frankly, I enjoyed the war when he came back? I forget. It was one of the American guys.
Oh, probably. Oh gosh. That's a very American thing to say about war. That could have been.
No, it was Belgium. He was a British officer. He was Sir.
Was it Monty?
Sir Adrian Paul Gislaine, or I don't know.
Oh, okay. I was right. Well, that's a very common statement. And
said,
I think that more.
Frankly, I enjoyed the war.
Yeah, I think that's probably. It's a very odd. As a person who's never served and never had that privilege, I think it's very much from my reading, which is an incredibly hubristic thing to say. I understand that to be much more common than people would admit.
Oh yeah, a lot of people love war. A lot of people just love it. Now they don't like it if they have a traumatic episode. I say that people like war a lot more when they're on the side that has air superiority.
Oh well, 100%. Yeah,
they like it a lot less when they're under constant shelling from above.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of, I talk to people, soldiers who in our military who've come back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and they point blank told me, they wouldn't admit it on a podcast probably, but they'd be he said I loved killing people. I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, he was like, I just loved shooting people. I was like, well, I guess there's a place for that. And
Lewis talks about it. I think one of the quotes I put up recently where he says that the whole veneer of civilization is kept up by hard bitten men that don't much care about you, and if we don't have them, then everything falls apart. I think it's fascinating how little he was troubled by his experience. And we're not talking about, and he writes, and he says it was obviously, he's like, you wake up and you have nightmares and you have all these things. But I was just talking about this to my brother, who's my first guest on the Lewis podcast I'll be doing, where Lewis grew up in a generation of men who all would have known exactly what his experiences were like.
Right.
which I imagine helped him to process those and to not feel disconnected from them in a way that, would be really difficult. All of his friends that he's down the pub with reading their books, they had all done that. They knew what it was like.
Yeah.
And
it was it was better than their time at school.
He says that explicitly.
Yeah.
He explicitly says that it was basically all of a sudden he was with young men and older men who were who were looking out for one another, not looking to harm one another. And in fact, he says of some of there's a quote from Surprised by Joy where he says he finishes narrating like a particularly troubling kind of paragraph about just how there was a systematized process of hazing and abuse of every kind at this one school where the older boys would just prey on the younger boys. And
including basically rape them.
No, worse than that, including that there would be younger boys that would be kept basically by older boys as willing or unwilling partners. And so he said, but you must not think something like, he says, you must not think too harshly on them because most of them, passed in the mud in Flanders.
Yeah.
And like he said, basically like you should allow them to have to be remembered well because they all died.
Right.
Like in his heart, he's pitying these people that were like abusing him in every way, which is an incredibly
and there's
noble sentiment. But
if I recall correctly, there's even a passage where he talks about it sounds weird to say the good or enjoyable side of like a abusive relationship or pederasty.
He said it was one of the few things that was it's a very Lewisian passage. I personally do not think I can find it in my heart to agree with him. Right. And I think that I also think it smacks very much of a person who has been abused.
I agree.
Who tries to then find
the good in it. Yeah.
Or how did I do something wrong? Just these reactions, that human reactions people have when they've gone through something that awful. And he said, but what he talks about in that passage is he says that it was one of the few places where some form of the good kind of broke into our lives. And that's a very Lewisian idea, right? That the good things are good. And even and they have to be bent and broken by evil. So love and kindness and compassion is good. And even if it's all bent up by this horrifying, perverted thing, it's still, there's something there, right. Is all he's really arguing for, which I think is, again, that's a tough passage to swallow.
It was, but I always think back to that when people talk about, the good old days. They go like
right.
Not so long ago, like people in Lewis's day, they treated children horribly. Like,
they didn't believe they were people.
Yeah, it was crazy.
It truly didn't. Yeah, and Lewis, even you can catch in Surprised by Joy this very long thread where he hems and haws and tries very hard to defend himself against accusations that he's basically not sticking by the old school. In the fact that he's telling on how terrifying all of it was, right. And he said, "I know some of you are going to say I'm just not a real man, or I'm not a school man, or I'm not an upstanding British person for saying I don't like this."
Yeah.
And that's how intrinsic this system was, right? It was like, well, this is the way you raise. I didn't get the heat I wanted to. I'm not as good as you are, Yoshi, at trolling. But I attempted to kind of pin some hackles a little bit with, I think I said something about, you must remember that Lewis had a perfect little classical education. And then I threw up one of those quotes about, one of the boys running into his room with a revolver that would have one in the chamber, and he would fire off the empty chambers, counting and remembering, basically like Russian roulette, but on somebody else. And Lewis says, he wasn't that bad a guy. And, after all, and I think it's so funny because and this comes from my world, right? I grew up homeschooled and homeschooled my kids and love doing it. And we are very prey to this rosy tinted antiquarian view of history where we believe that, like, when we say a classical education, I absolutely agree with you. This is what we should be remembering. This is what it was to be classically educated, was to be fed into this kind of meat grinder for children. And I'm not saying that there's not good things to be brought out of that, obviously, but we so quickly want to only remember the good parts of the past.
Yeah.
And imagine that we've got it uniquely bad. And Lewis, of all people, who, while he could be a bit of an antiquarian sometimes, I think he would be very quick to say, look, it wasn't like you think it was,
Oh, I've gone so far to say the modern world where things are like super safe and everyone says like be kind, and I think all of that is a natural reaction to several, maybe centuries of people like just really being kind of super abusive, especially to children. Like,
I mean, yeah.
I think we are in an overcorrection. I think we've gone a little too far the other way now, where everyone's like, if you say a mean word, everyone freaks out.
Sure.
Little too far, but like it's understandable why. Because, I mean, like if you grew up in the 1800s,
It's a bad place.
You're 5 years old. They may be raping you at school, and if you're not at school, you go into a factory and get your fingers chopped off.
Yeah, you're right. You're down the coal hole,
Yeah.
And yeah, no, it was rough, and I think that's one thing I'm trying very hard. Again, I'm talking about the school. I'm teaching again this year for the kids, and I'm realizing that I love teaching middle and high school kids. I'm not realizing I used to do that at church all the time for youth. We led youth, and I love it. It's just a fun experience because they don't care to make you feel good about your teaching.
Yeah.
They do not care. So you're teaching them. You have to bring your like S tier game because you will see on their face whether they're having a good time or not, right? And I am trying to think through how I'm going to get some of these ideas across because I'm doing U.S. History 1. And I want them to have an understanding of how, I'm a big Dan Carlin head, and Dan Carlin always quotes that, line. He says the past is another country. They do things different there.
Yeah.
And he always has that thought experiment where he says, if you took a baby from today and you raised them in another era, would that baby be a 21st century baby or a 19th century baby or a 5th century baby or whatever, right? And of course, I think it's to me, I would argue very much so. Some of this is just, this is what is acceptable at the time, with a good combination of the evil of the human heart, which will just expand to fill the space allotted to it, right? But he had never forget, he had a whole 4-hour podcast he did, which he always does those. And he did it. It was called Painfotainment.
Yeah.
And he talked about the practice, which has been the practice for most of human history, the vast majority of utilizing public criminal punishment through torture as entertainment.
Yeah.
And he just, in passages he's quoting from source materials, and it's just like I had a hard time finishing it. He's explaining what goes into breaking someone on the wheel and what that means, and all these just terrifying things, right? And he says, what is it about people that why did people then want this? They liked this. They desired it. They did not think it was odd or strange or disgusting.
They didn't have the internet. What else were they going to do?
Right. But if you did this to us today, we'd be like, I think we'd be justly horrified. We would like to think. We would like to think.
We'd like to think.
And it's always been, I think there is something about people in that period where there was just less of a regard for life, maybe a callousness, because if you knew that life was hard and death was ever present, that maybe you just didn't have this sense of that you were owed life or a good thing or a good time. And maybe you didn't feel that for others. I'm not arguing that's better. I think it's undoubtedly worse.
Right.
But yeah, just like for Lewis to grow up in that world and obviously to suffer from what you can read of his life, to basically suffer daily until middle age.
Yeah.
In just unimaginable ways, whether it's emotional or physical. And for him to kind of wrap that up in a tidy bow and sort of say, well, that was sort of what life was like back then.
Yeah.
And obviously I think it impacted him in all these ways, but yeah, it goes to show you that, like, I think we have no idea how like blessed we are to be in an age where some of this stuff, as you read it now, you're like, how could this happen?
Right. We have our own problems for sure.
No doubt.
Every age does. That's the thing. And
right.
I think most people, if they had a time machine and got you get to try each century for a week, most people would end up here.
Is there anywhere else that you stop? You personally?
Anywhere else that I would personally stop? I've always thought that I would do well in feudal Japan and one of the times where you could walk around Greece just sticking your finger up in the air and talking about forms. I think I could have been one of those.
Again, we assume the privilege that you'd be the guy walking around Greece talking
Exactly.
about
Well, I mean,
forms,
this
and
is-
not the guy, mucking out the stall for that guy. But sure, of course.
Well, here's the thing. I figure if I have a time machine, then I also have the power to do that. You know,
you have time machine privilege, I believe they call it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you have a time
right.
machine, you can work tremendous things into your favor. You know,
Don't screw this up, right? Yeah.
yeah.
I always imagined that I would, and maybe this was just growing up as a massive Lewis nut, but I always have wondered what was in the water between like 1925 and 1955. Because clearly something is different about the world. Just like the explosion of like every person that you think of, every idea that you think of, there's so much that just gets traced back to that period. Right. And I've always wondered, like, what is about that time? Like, so clearly something was different, something was special, something was going on, and I've kind of wondered about that for a long time.
Yeah.
But again, that's just like you said. We're hoping that time machine privilege puts me, somewhere in Manhattan or Chicago, getting to write a book about it, not in Flanders or
people say that. But I think I think I could pull it off. I think you could pull it off pretty easy. Like I'd say, okay, they gather. I take a while to learn ancient Greek, right? That'd be
right, of course.
First hurdle.
You gotta prepare.
But I'd be like, listen. I'd draw a map and I'd say, listen, I have a serviceable map of the world here. It's not great, but you're gonna be surprised. It's not great by our standards. It's not Google Earth, but from my mind.
No.
But you're gonna be surprised how much I can predict is out in that Mediterranean Sea.
100%.
You're gonna think I'm some sort of prophet, and if you go this way, there's this whole big. We could probably go take them over. They got England. It's great. It's a walk. It is a walk. I'll get you that. But I mean,
I don't remember what latitude it's at, but England is over there generally.
I
can for sure get that out. Right.
Let me tell you. Yeah, I could tell them. I'd say, listen. I'd read up beforehand. I'd say these Assyrians are going to come soon. Prepared, and I'd be a prophet to some degree, right? I think that would get me in pretty easily.
I think it's
you can predict
definitely
a few things.
It's your best shot. I'll give it that. So
you study how to predict eclipses before you go, and you'd be like, tomorrow's eclipse, and you're like, oh yeah. Then you're
right.
There's ways you could get in pretty easily. I feel like
that's actually a fun thought experiment. Is what are the mental pieces of information that you need to have the most impact on a person, on a pre-industrial person, that if you can just kind of pull them out of your mind. I think eclipses has got to be one.
I say, guys, I'm gonna rock our worlds here. We're all gonna wash our hands once a day. It's gonna
preferably after we poop.
Our city's gonna be so much healthier in 1 year if you just follow me. Wash your hands once a day. And
the eclipse is coming.
And the eclipse is. I mean, you would if you a few little bits of information well planned, you could really set yourself up in the past.
Yeah, you'd be for sure. I agree with that.
I mean, it'd be hard. People think like, oh, I know about electricity, but all the infrastructure you need to make a battery is not going to happen.
Right. You're hopeless. But, that's right. Well, I'll bring back an iPhone. Well, good for you.
You could do a potato battery. They had copper. You could do it, but again, you need a filament.
There's actually. I don't remember where I read this, but supposedly, and this could have been one of those crank history things, it's not correct, but supposedly there's evidence of wet cell battery experimentation in Egypt, in ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
So it's possible that maybe they even would have known what you were trying to do. You could get some help.
But they'd be like, oh, yeah, we know about it. But, I would say, we put this up there, lightning is going to strike it. I can channel where Thor's lightning hits with this lightning rod, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I think you.
Well, I don't know how we got to time machines, but I definitely will be. What I will be doing anyway. All this to say, the project that I'm trying to do is by just bringing Lewis back from primary sources, just letting him talk some, and then me ranting about it. I'm kind of doing a twofold thing. I want to counter what I feel like are some of the weird sort of mythical elements of his thing now. And like you said, no, he didn't really much like kids. Doesn't make him a bad person. He just didn't love kids. Probably wouldn't have wanted to be your grandpa. Although there are some pretty adorable letters that he wrote to one of his godchildren. So I don't know, man. Nobody's everything.
I actually think I have a theory. We'll get to your supernatural things to say. I have a theory that he is, as an adult, because of the trauma he experienced as a child, sort of always stuck in childhood in a way. And this explains his relationship, his sort of Oedipal relationship with this older woman who could have been his mother, and the fact that he wrote Narnia, which was a continuation of his Animal Land things he wrote as a child.
Yeah.
He just basically
Not only do I agree with you,
yeah.
Not only do I agree with you, and I'm not, so obviously, I don't think either of us saying this in some sort of weird way. He's not like freaking, he's not like regressing or something.
No. But he's
I think
stuck in some ways.
He absolutely.
Yeah.
I would tell the kids in class, C.S. Lewis is and I'd point to the class and they'd all yell nerd. Like, because he's very much, he is the sensitive young man.
Yeah.
For like his whole life. And yes, I absolutely agree with that. I think that I have to find, if you reread Surprised by Joy, I think in one place he even talks about how he felt like he was part of his childhood was robbed and then he kind of got it back later in life, I think he said.
Yeah.
So I 100% agree with you. There's actually a very really sweet and endearing kind of quote from one of his letters very late in his life as he's ailing. And he sort of writes that to his brother, isn't it sort of kind of funny how where it's just you and me in the house, just kind of writing stories, even though we know that holidays are coming to an end. He's saying like, I know I'm going to die, what we don't get forever. And I know it's wrapping up and I'm just enjoying now at the end of my lifetime with just you, kind of how they were when they were kids, just hanging out in the attic at their parents' house, off of school.
Right.
And it's
Writing
just this
stories.
Right. And it's just this very sweet showing this touching thing, showing the relationship between them. But there's obviously like a childlike quality to that of how he recognizes that like your life comes full circle and so no, I would actually so very much agree with that. And I think that I am not a Freudian by any stretch of the imagination, pretty anti-Freudian, but I think there's absolutely a element of this, the fact that he loses his mom when he's 6 years old, that he never has a close relationship with his father. I think there's just this brokenness, I would say to him, there's broken places in him that are never quite mended,
right?
His whole life.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll just be yelling about him on Substack until they kick me off, which they can't do. So,
well, I mean, as someone that's been kicked off a lot,
not Lewis. I don't have spicy opinions about anything else.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. I've been kicked off things. I don't even know what I ever said. I don't. But,
oh my goodness.
So you belong to getting to the supernatural paranormal bit. You belong to what would you call it? Charismatic movement. I think
some have said a cult. No, it's not a cult. No, it's not a cult. I shouldn't even joke like that. No, I am a part of. I'm conceived, born, and raised in the Calvary Chapel movement. So Calvary Chapel, and I have to do a history lesson. Is that okay? Because I'm that guy. I like that stuff. So Calvary Chapel is really the place where the Jesus movement in the United States in the late 60s and 70s kind of came out of.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair to claim complete credit for that. Obviously, number one, it's the revival work of God. Number two, there were many other groups that were involved, but Calvary was absolutely at the epicenter of that. So for people who are not familiar, just really quickly, Chuck Smith, who's kind of the founding pastor of Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa, which was the first kind of church that kind of spawned all this. He was originally a Foursquare church pastor. I don't know how familiar you are with Foursquare. Is a Pentecostal. Pentecostal movement was started by Amy Semple McPherson, was a female healing preacher in the 1920s and stuff in the United States. And Chuck had kind of come up in that church, had been teaching, had been pastoring, had been a successful pastor, ended up feeling like he wanted to leave Foursquare, not so much because he disagreed with them theologically, although he felt that there was an overemphasis on healing, that it was like just the focus of everything, and he was less comfortable with that. But he never, to his dying day, was what we would call a charismatic. Calvary Chapel people would distinguish a charismatic from a Pentecostal.
Right.
Most of that is just parsing. There's some people who their eyeballs have already rolled back in their head, Yoshi, but we don't care about them. Right. So a Pentecostal, it would be a person who's in a Pentecostal, more of a denominational structure, and they have certain theological emphases that I might not share, like maybe for example, it's a very common teaching. An evidence of being saved or filled with the Holy Spirit is that you speak in tongues. Full stop.
Yeah.
I don't believe that scripturally, even though I do speak in tongues, but it's not something that everyone does, and it's very clear from scripture that you shouldn't expect that. So I would disagree. I would be a charismatic, which means, in plain terms, I believe that there's no expiration date on the manifestation of the Holy Spirit that you see in the book of Acts. I'm open to being shown why we should say that these things are not for today, but I've never been convinced from scripture.
Okay.
Reading of scripture would lead us to believe that these things are normative. They're not like there's a scaffolding doctrine that's taught by a lot of people who would say, well, this was just to get the church started. Well, that's a great idea, but I don't see it. So I believe, in other words, that we should see all these things present today in the life of the church in some way. As a charismatic, though, I would say, but decently in an order, right? Those are the instructions that Paul gives. So that comes out of the Calvary Chapel movement. Chuck really becomes this kind of like reach out guy to the hippies.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of misremembers this. Did you see the movie? It was called Jesus Revolution that came out a couple years ago.
Yes, but I think I was like washing the dishes as I watched it. I couldn't.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah. Kelsey Grammer, which was an interesting poll. And I will say, as a person who grew up in the movement and knows some of the people, or knows secondhand some of the people that are portrayed in that, they did a shockingly good job, especially for a Christian movie. They did a shockingly good job of portraying all that. And one of the things I think they get right is everybody kind of remembers Chuck as like the hippie pastor. More accurately, Chuck was the pastor to the hippies after the Summer of Love.
Okay.
So after this very quick, meteoric experimentation explosion where there's the free love and the drugs and the Eastern mysticism, which will be very important. The hippies they're all kind of skids now. They're out of drug money. Many of the young women have been horribly broken and abused in these. It's unsurprisingly, when you have large communities of men who are very interested in free love, you have terrible things happen. Right. The drug stuff, kids their minds are broke and all this, right? And they've been violently rejected by society. It's this huge rift in society that these people are awful. We don't like them. They're communists. They're all these things. So these kids are kind of hurting and feeling disillusioned. This was the age of Aquarius. We were going to connect to God.
Right.
And there was a genuine sense that they wanted that. They felt shut out of the churches. They felt shut out of life in general, of the society, and they felt like something's wrong. Why are we so disconnected from God, from the spiritual world? And they were seeking these things in Eastern mysticism and New Age stuff and drugs, mostly drugs. And in all of that, as all of that kind of comes crashing down, there's this huge heart that Chuck has for him, and he just kind of opens up the church to him, which we think of this as like, yeah, of course, that's what church is for. But that was fundamentally different from how church had been.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. And not just that he brought the hippies in, but he he allowed young men to teach, and he didn't tell them to dress differently. And he said, when some of them said, there's a very funny story that gets traded around Calvary Chapel, that Love Song was one of the first bands that was formed out of like what was called the Maranatha Music Movement. It's where contemporary Christian music came from. Right. You're welcome, and also I'm sorry, depending on what you think about that. So many of many of the recognizable CCM artists from the 2000s, especially, are all Calvary Chapel people. Right. Switchfoot, maybe not Chris Tomlin, but Jeremy Camp and a bunch of these people. Cutlass. I'm dating myself by these music references, but I don't care. Love Song is kind of this little foursome that was playing Beatles stuff, basically. And they said, would you mind us playing at one of these worship services? And Chuck says, well, sure. Can you play? Like, if you want to play, you're doing songs about Jesus, you can do it. And they said, okay, but not this week because our bass player is finishing up his weed probation. Right. So when he's done with that, then can we? And he says, yeah, absolutely. So it's a big part of this Calvary Chapel movement that causes this explosion of all these young kids bringing their friends, bringing their neighbor who was into this stuff, bringing all the kids that they'd met on the commune to come and meet Jesus. And there was not only was there teaching of the word in a simple way, which is a big hallmark of Calvary Chapel that I love, but there was also this expectation that you were going to meet God. This was going to be an experience, not just we're going to learn, which is good, but you were going to meet God. And that there are a lot of very cool stories. There's some books you can read, God's Forever Family, and a couple different books that talk about these early days of the Jesus movement. And there's these guys who have receipts about times that, oh yeah, that one time where we all sat around and we didn't have enough food, so somebody prayed over the can of tuna and it fed 20 people.
Right.
I mean, like legit crazy miraculous stuff, right? People praying over a car and healing it and all this stuff, right? So just many, healing experiences of people's bodies and manifestations of the Holy Spirit and all this. And this is a pretty intrinsic part to, I think, what was welcoming about Calvary Chapel to these kids. Because you've got to remember, they're coming out of this environment where they were expecting something that moved them, that made them feel something that was I was homeschooled, so I would not know. Maybe you're familiar, maybe you're not. I don't want to assume. But I understand that when you smoke weed, you feel things. Like you actually have an experience. That's my understanding. Right. So they're expecting that, right? And they have this experience where there's when you're baptized with the Holy Spirit, it's a spiritual experience. You feel like very often what people talk about is that there's a connection to God's love for them, and understanding that God actually knows who they are and loves them is a huge thing that people talk about all the time in those terms. This was exactly what the kids have been looking for.
Right.
So yeah, I grew up in that movement for the world, and I grew up in Calvary Chapel in Rio Rancho in the Albuquerque area, New Mexico, just with a bunch of my church was nothing but there's a lot of people, but I mean I grew up with ex-gangbangers, ex-drug dealers, like
well,
just like all these.
Is where every hippie landed if they survived.
That's absolutely true. Oh, yeah, that's more true than you know. Absolutely.
I know. I'm 100%. I know. I'm very aware.
Yeah. So it's the high, something about the high desert. I don't know. So it was that my pastor was a guy who still owned his VW bus from the 70s. He had gotten out of the Navy and been in California, gotten out of the Navy, and had wound up in Calvary Chapel when he kind of hit rock bottom out of the Navy. And I was raised around some of these people that were really second generation, meaning they knew people who had been in the Jesus movement, or they had come out of the Jesus movement. And as I grew up in that church environment, it was kind of expected that these were going to be things that you were going to encounter. It wasn't just going to be something that somebody would tell you a story about. These were going to be your experiences. For whatever reason, though, that never really connected with me until I was in my early 20s and started going to Calvaries that were really interested in there's almost like a renewal movement going on right now, in the sense that we're like, hey, this has always been what we've been about. It's not just teaching the Bible. It's also this charismatic tradition that we expect these things. We're not open but cautious. We're open and expectant,
Right.
And so, that wound up to me being down here. I'm currently on staff at a Calvary Chapel. I'm blessed to be an assistant pastor down here.
Are you still in New Mexico?
Oh, no, I'm down in the Alabama area, central Alabama.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
Love it down here. And we and I'm not unique at all in saying this, but we have been experiencing a just continued, what is the DM I sent you? I said very, very normal and unspectacular and regular occurrences of miraculous things.
You said very clean. I think you said very clean and tidy. I don't have it pulled up.
Right. Which I kind of, by which I mean, I think we get this idea, and I know sometimes, unfortunately, I think it comes from from some of the worst versions of this that people think of, right? Things that are just meant to sort of take people's money and manipulate them emotionally. We get this idea that when God moves in miraculously or supernaturally, there's going to be some sort of thing. There's going to be a sound and a I don't know, man. A halo, exactly. A halo and a bolt of lightning and all this stuff is going to happen. And Lewis talks about this in Miracles, actually. He says that we should expect that if he reverses the laws of nature in one place, nature will immediately come and fill the gap up.
Right. And
everything else will just occur as normal. That's 100% been my experience with these things. So in a church where we, we'll have periodic meetings, we'll call them like an encounter service, where we'll have, prayer and an openness to the manifestation of the Holy Spirit, which will look like usually pretty normal stuff. Somebody will stand up and say, I just feel like the Lord is saying this in this moment to the church, and they'll share that, and it'll be weighed, by people, and somebody will share a tongue with an interpretation or a prophetic word or different things like that, right? But there's absolutely been people that have been prayed over to have really life-altering, like persistent things that are going on in their body medically, and those things have been spontaneously healed. More than like I'm talking like more than 5 to 10 times that this has happened that I know of.
Can you give me a concrete example without naming names to give anyone away, or whatever?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So a couple of years ago, we were at a men's retreat, and just after, I don't know if you've ever been in those settings, it's kind of like men are awkward at making friends with people at the best of times, and a men's retreat is kind of a uniquely weird setting sometimes. So you're just kind of like, afterwards, just sort of like somebody's taught, and we're just kind of hanging out together and trying to make friends. And there's this guy from a different church that I don't know, and he kind of approaches some guys, and we're chatting and whatever. And he sort of lets it, how guys could have like a sucking chest wound, and they'd kind of make sure that you found out, but like real casual, like I'm okay, but also,
right.
And so he sort of just casually drops that he's like got a pre-op appointment for a cancerous tumor in his head, like he's got some sort of tumor in his brain. And they know it's cancerous. He's had all these scans done, and he's going in for this pre-op when he gets back from this retreat. And we're all kind of like, oh my gosh, this is a big, heavy thing. And one of our guys, this is a very common thing that happens when you have this materialistic cringe, is the only way I can put it, where if someone who is full of faith and says, well, what if we pray about it? That person speaks up. If you're like me, you have this feeling of, why are we doing this? Like, this is not a good idea.
Yeah. Like I'm embarrassed that you would even suggest it.
Yes, this is not a good idea. What if nothing happens?
Right.
What if this is like, there's so many different, like all these just stuff. And I have learned that I have to just freaking humble that, because it comes from a part of me, I've learned, that does not want to be connected to God.
Oh, and that I was just talking about that. It always comes down to the part of you that's scared to do it, like scared to connect. Yeah.
Yes, that fears being connected with God.
And
I
have my feelings about that. I don't know about you, but I think the fear comes from, there's a part of me that fears if you get close enough to God, you get swallowed up by it and disappear. I don't know if that's your feeling.
So I have never experienced that. I understand that, though, and many people have shared that with me. So that must be a thing that many people experience. My experience is more like I think it just comes from your unique busted thing that's going on in your life, in your flesh, in your body, right? Where you have a unique part of the curse that's working on you. And for me personally, just to be incredibly vulnerable, I don't want to be made to feel the intensity of being in the presence of God all the time. Because it can be an incredibly emotionally vulnerable experience, and I don't like that. Right. And that's a terrible thing to say. Like, but that's the reality. Once you realize that if you take God at his, there's people right now who think we're crazy, and that's funny. If you take God
this podcast, I've talked about people that have Bigfoot-induced glossolalia. So all of our listeners, we're well past.
That's all right. I've got non-Bigfoot-induced glossolalia, so it's all good. That's hilarious. I think that if you believe, I don't know another way to be a Christian than to be a supernaturalist. So if you believe that God is there and that he is, and he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him, then the great tragedy is that you're not always doing that.
Yeah.
Because he's available, like he wants, he's told you. In fact, he has commanded you and said, what are you doing? Why are you not doing this? And so anyway, that's a sidebar, but like somebody speaks up and prays for him. 4 or 5 of us lay hands on him and pray for him. And you do, in these moments, you do it almost like, it's like a kid obeying, but their heart isn't in it. Sometimes you're just like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I know I'm supposed to do it. And we pray for him genuinely. We ask the Lord, would you heal this guy? Would you make it so that he doesn't have to go through this terrible situation? And we're very diligent. I've learned to be very diligent, not the shot block prayers. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Okay, so if somebody, especially a young believer who's very full of faith and very excited, and they're going to pray, they're going to lob this half-court shot. Lord, will you just spontaneously heal this man's cancer right now? And then a very kind, but I would argue very misguided, older Christian will say, now, Lord, we know that you don't always heal.
Right.
Now, Lord, we're going to be here for what, and I hate that because I've been guilty of that. And what that means is it's a lack of faith. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. I don't believe that we can bind God.
It's a verbalization of a doubt.
Exactly. And I don't believe that this is magic. I don't believe we can bind God to do anything by our faith or our words or anything. But it is the Bible also says, however, that he who comes should ask full of faith without any doubting. And is that not exactly that of, hey, I don't want anybody to get disappointed, so I'm just going to protect us from God answered our prayer,
right?
Because we didn't ask really for anything, so we didn't, we try not to shot block, and we prayed for him, and nothing fantastic happened, and he went home and he texted one of our guys. He said, I went in for my pre-op. And this is the funny thing about people who've been healed miraculously is that they're very low key about it. I think because they're afraid to actually admit that something happened. I don't know why. Maybe you're afraid that
in my case, if it's ever, it's like if you verbalize it, maybe it'll stop working.
Oh, sure. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. And so
you don't want to step on a crack and break your mother's back.
Yeah. I mean, right. I don't know. And so he texts somebody and he said, I went in for my pre-op and they can't find the tumor.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about, right. I love stories like that because that is not, hey, my back hurts and then you pray for me and I experience the emotional and physical feeling of my back not hurting anymore, which could be 17 different things.
Right.
And I don't say that doubting, but there's many different things that could be. We're talking about we could feel it in his head. It was a large mass in his forehead that you could feel.
Probably why he brought it up, because you could see it. And he's like, I should probably.
Notice
this. I should probably tell him about the my head.
Right. So the doctors, he showed up at his pre-op and they're like, I don't know what you're here for. We can't. There's nothing here. We did a scan. You have no tumor now. Yeah. So just bonkers, right? A complete.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. We had a young woman who was prayed over in our fellowship who still attends our church, who had basically lifelong from her young adulthood, pretty crippling, pre-arthritic type symptoms in her shoulder and stuff, which was spontaneously healed that evening, which does not always happen. So she actually, while we were praying for her, experienced a physical feeling of the pain basically being unknotted and leaving her body. And that's not recurred for her.
Right.
Which is crazy. Sometimes that doesn't happen. I prayed for a gentleman one time who later said that he's had crippling back pain, which he still has. And he said that he experienced a several week cessation of that pain, which was bizarre for him. In his adult life, he's had a back pain.
Right.
We prayed for, I'm probably missing people because this is how it happens. Prayed for a young man who had one of those, we've learned to be suspicious of things that doctors can't pin down, but are definitely happening to you. Because I personally believe that very often that'll have a spiritual connection to it. Young man who was just experiencing crippling fatigue syndrome, and just I guess what you'd call a chronic fatigue type thing. And experienced that being removed from him. And I'm probably forgetting stories. There's a 45-minute video. I'll send you a link that we did because this stuff kept happening, and we didn't want to forget stuff.
Right.
Because you forget these things. And so we had a guy come in and do a video with my pastor, and he did this whole video of just kind of telling a bunch of these stories. He had a pretty crazy experience where he led a prayer meeting over in, he went to a South American country where we do some missions work over there. And there were 5 or 6 different people healed in that prayer meeting from various things. So it's just gotten to the point where we joke about it now, where we say, well, we're not surprised when this happens because it's just kind of a thing now that we expect. Does it happen every time we pray? Absolutely not. Is it ever some really spectacular thing? No, not really.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it doesn't. I went in and asked to be prayed. I had a hernia that I had sustained by being a ding dong and lifting without a weight belt. And I went in and asked for prayer, fully expecting, hey, this could happen to me. I could go. I would have loved to go to my pre-op and say, yeah, well, we can't find your hernia, but that just wasn't the case for me. And so just had the surgery and was good to go. It's become a thing in my life where I have realized that these are things that God desires to do more often than we ask. How often I don't know, but more often than we ask.
I so agree. I have two big questions. First, do you have any sort of theory? I always try to figure out why. Maybe when I shouldn't. A theory of why sometimes the prayer works and sometimes it doesn't. That's the big question.
Do you have
any sort of is there any sort of connecting data points between these events when they did or didn't work that you could point to? Is there any sort of overarching pattern you've noticed?
That is a good question. I would love to be able to tell you yes, because it would really change a lot of people's lives who've struggled with unanswered prayer for a number of years. But I will tell you that I have contradicting anecdotes in that area, right? Because if I tell you, oh, well, it's just that it's about your personal inner experience of faith and connection to this request. Okay, that sounds good. And I think I can even find some biblical warrant for that. But I've had experience. The gentleman who had it healed was back. It was the most nonchalant prayer I've ever prayed for anybody. Me and another friend laid hands on him and just said, Lord, I pray that you'd heal, his back, because it's really bothering him. We love him very much, and we know you'd love to do that. Anyway, amen. And then that was it. And I was shocked to hear. I personally went home kind of discouraged. I was like, it was like, what am I even doing? Like, that wasn't anything. And then he told me, yeah, I've felt great for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I've had other cases where people have, one case, actually, praise the Lord, this ended up great because it was a real trial in our life for a long time. A very close family friend, they had been barren their entire marriage. Ernest just had desired kids and had gone through the whole cycle of, okay, obviously this isn't going to happen, so we need to kind of set this aside and just not want this anymore. And multiple people in my life, including my wife and my pastor, and I think 1 to 2 other people at their church, completely separately, felt that they had been impressed from the Lord to go tell them, you're going to have a child. Mm-hmm. Now, that's about the worst thing that you can be asked to tell somebody.
Yeah. Someone that's struggling to have a child. Yeah.
Gosh, that's awful, right? And everybody struggled over it. I mean, they kind of linked up and shared stories afterwards. And like, I was racked with this for months. Like, I don't want to do this. But this was shared, and nothing happened for years. And I mean, now you imagine the guilt and like, what was I doing? And they received that in faith, but then they're praying about it and they're struggling and they're discouraged. And then after years of prayer from people, they have a child, and he's a great kiddo, and he's almost a year old, and he's adorable, right? Now, I firmly believe that that's a miraculous thing, because I have heard them explain from the doctors how just completely that wasn't going to happen.
Right.
So I certainly receive that as an answer to prayer. But that's the opposite situation. Here's somebody who earnestly desired this and had the faith and was being prayed over and for by multiple people that believed this would happen, and it still took a really long time. It looked like it wasn't going to happen at all.
Right.
So I do know that for me personally, I don't think God just desires the healing. I think he desires the relationship with you. And so if in my life, if you're going to come with this attitude of like, yeah, sure, whatever, I've tried everything else, I guess I'll try this. I'm not saying that nothing will happen. And I absolutely repudiate the teaching that, oh, it's, you got cancer and died, so you just didn't have faith. That's absolutely ridiculous. Like I not biblical, and it's harmed many people, that teaching.
Right.
So I don't believe that. But I do believe that if you're going to come to God, you should understand that the Bible says that, you have to believe he is, and he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him.
Right.
I think he allows, you read Problem of Pain when you were 12. God shouts to us, in our pains, right? So he oftentimes will be wanting to bring out of the evil of that situation a closeness and a connection to you. And if you don't want to be vulnerable, then are you not preventing, in some sense, him from having that experience that he wants you to have?
Right.
Like I said, one of the biggest just subjective things that people have shared with me when we asked, like, you came and asked for prayer, and you struggled with this for years, and just out of curiosity, why did you wait? And people say, well, I just didn't want to put my hopes on this and get disappointed. Yeah. And I was afraid that if I asked, it wouldn't happen. And so I felt like it was better to just kind of suffer through without asking.
Isn't that crazy? But it sort of makes sense too.
Oh, it absolutely makes sense.
It's like crazy, but it also makes sense.
I can totally identify with that feeling. Yeah. And so, yeah, I would say that the only commonality that I found is that the healing becomes almost secondary in people's lives when they explain to you, like, that it's the healing, but it's also this overwhelming sense that God actually cared about me enough to intervene in my situation.
Yeah.
That this wasn't just something that God, do you see what I'm saying? Like, that's another thing that people will tell us is like, I felt like God didn't want me to pray about this because it wasn't important, or it wasn't really a big deal, or
right.
He could answer, but he wasn't going to. for whatever reason that people
My
get all
problem
bound up
is so
in their heart.
minuscule and unimportant, and
Or I'm a bad
he's
person and I've
busy,
done
I'm a bad
I've done the wrong thing and I don't deserve this, or I haven't, whatever people listen to these lies, right? And so I think that it's really interesting to see that. I think certainly in my life, I mean, I firmly believe, I almost forgot about this story. I don't want to forget about this story. I totally believe that my wife was miraculously healed from a blood clot, like a life-threatening blood clot. We were 7 months pregnant with our first daughter, and she got a blood clot in her leg, very high up. Everything kind of swelled up really bad. Medically transported an hour away to UVA hospital from where we were living at the time. And, of course, you're just like panicked, right? Like, this is the worst doomsday scenario, and they, like they do in hospitals, we spent a day and a half thinking that she was like teetering on the brink of death, when really, even if you have a blood clot, once you're at the hospital and you're being treated with thinners, it's kind of resolving itself. Like, you're okay.
Right.
But they don't tell you that. So we're just panicked the whole time, right? We're just like, oh my gosh. And when she goes in to get, and of course we're praying this whole time, I'm asking the Lord for help. I'm asking the Lord for wisdom. I'm asking, for all these things. And we go in afterwards for the post. They do a follow-up, of course. Like, hey, you're okay. We released you. Let's do a follow-up. The doctor said, it's the funniest thing. We looked on all of your MRIs, and the reason why they kept you so long on the MRI is they couldn't really understand the results they were seeing. It looked like we had caught a blood clot in the process of being formed, and then it had dissipated. He said, but that's not what blood clot do. That's not medically what a blood clot is. A blood clot occurs very quickly and happens, and now you have it. And he said it looked like we were seeing a blood clot about to form, but then it had stopped.
Right.
Now, I'm just a faithful enough man to believe that that's absolutely an answer to prayer. Whenever you see spooky action at a distance, medically, I think it's quite, and you've prayed about it, I think it's quite fair to chalk that up. So yeah, in that case especially, just the biggest thing that did in our lives is just this understanding, like, holy cow, God actually cared about us. Not that you wouldn't believe that, but it's like this tangible thing in your life. So yeah, I think it's, the relationship is an important thing.
Yeah, it's like that. I always go to the passage in Ezekiel, I'll give you a new heart when you have a stone one, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's the idea, I think, from God's perspective, is that yes, maybe you have, and I don't want to people use this to be like, oh, say miracles don't happen at all because it has some higher purpose or whatever. But there is an element of you've got physical elements and that's bad, but God's also saying, but you actually need a heart transplant, like a physical, not necessarily a physical, but like a spiritual, like your heart is stone. You people cannot love, and you have to have something. And so sometimes that's painful.
Well, and don't we all know somebody who's been so eaten up by some physical ailment that it's really corrupted them internally as well, where it's just the suffering is allowed to have its head and they become a worse and worse person.
Yeah.
It's a very common thing, unfortunately. So yeah, it really is this thing where it's a very weird, kind of vulnerable, confrontational thing to ask somebody to pray for you to be healed.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna know. You know what I mean? Like, it's falsifiable.
Yeah.
I think that's what's so scary about it. It's one of the few things in the Christian faith where it's falsifiable. You can come and say that did happen or it didn't.
Which is what I love about this topic. It's like, well, here's something you can sink your teeth into. It's like, Aquinas and the Council of Trent and blah, blah, blah. Right. But all of that is airy fair. You can't, there's nothing to prove or disprove here.
Well, speaking of Aquinas, and this is my punk little Calvary Chapel butt talking, but I posted recently, Lewis got baptized with the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, which is not being a little cheeky. I don't know whether he would have described it that way. Certainly it doesn't stop the Lord from doing anything. But of course, Aquinas famously had an encounter with God towards the end of his life where he said, all of my writings are as, stubble, basically.
Right.
Which I think is fascinating that Aquinas, who's kind of the poster boy for super intellectual Christianity, right?
Right.
And he would probably be telling you at this point, dude, quit reading that.
Exactly. He's Seraphim saying, don't put me on a t-shirt, please.
Right.
Stop reading. I told you to stop reading me.
Right. I told you I don't really care about that stuff anymore. I've seen God, man.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. So I think that's probably why it's so vulnerable. Is you know,
it's vulnerable on both sides. The person asking, they're saying, I have a problem, first of all.
Yes.
They're asking for help, which is huge. And then it's like on your side, you're like, well, you may fail at this, Mr. Healer. You know, and then then you'll feel, the person will feel bad about bringing it up to you because like, oh, it didn't work. And I don't want to be this. It's this whole thing.
Which is why you have to be so careful. I mean, we constantly, there's a guy, there may or may not be a gentleman he's emailed us several times to the church office, and he's driving down from multiple states away, supposedly on Sunday of this recording, to be prayed for, to be healed, because he's seen, you know, something, and he's got some physical thing going on. And that's just like terrifying.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what a wonderful thing, but you have to constantly be reminding people, like, we can't do this, dude. Like, it's not magic. I literally can do nothing to help you. It's either God is going to show up or he's not gonna.
Right.
And I kind of like that, though, because it's like, we live in such unspiritual times, and we're such unspiritual people. And the fact that you have this thing that's so humbling, that really forces you to encounter like just how little belief you really have in the reality of God and the reality of the supernatural, in the fact that we're more than just like bits and atoms, you know. It's really healthy for me anyway, because it just you keeps bringing you to that place of recognizing that this is a thing that happens. You've got to do something with that. Have you ever read Craig Keener?
I have not.
So Craig Keener has 2 books. He has a very long book that was his academic take at it that's massive. I haven't read it. There's a short book that's a distillation of that. It's just called Miracles, I think, by Craig Keener. And it's basically him with bringing so many receipts for miraculous healings that you get, as awful as this, that you get bored.
Yeah.
At some point, because you're like,
this guy. I just looked him up. He looks familiar, but I didn't know his name. You
would probably love, especially because you're interested in like the verifiability of this. Right. Because Keener is he says at the beginning, he's like, I am only presenting you stuff that I can medically verify, or I witness verify in cases where medical verification isn't practical.
Right.
And I mean, he's got stories in that thing that are so weird, man. Like a baby that had limbs that weren't growing proportionately through some sort of, not quite a deformity, but like a developmental issue. And the mom is praying for the baby, and she's watching his little hand grow out past the sleeve in the onesie.
Right.
Just like, what the heck? Dude, like, that's so freaking weird. Like, just people who are healed. I think there was a lady who was healed of cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
Which that sounds like wrong to even say. Like, is that even like, what? Like, but a lady who was medically verifiably healed of CP, people who were healed of like paralysis and like just had like crazy cancer stuff that was insane. Like, just, and you're like, oh yeah, another person healed of cancer, another person who was blind and now they aren't blind, another person who was medically dead for hours and hours and then woke up, another, just like all this stuff.
Right.
And it really, it's wonderful because it's one of those books where it's like, look, you can debate whether or not you theologically want to believe this stuff can happen, but this stuff absolutely happens.
Right.
Like, I'm not interested in having that conversation with people anymore, because this stuff just does happen. Yeah. Now, whether that fits in with whatever your theological paradigm is, like, okay, that's another question we can have. But it's absolutely a thing that occurs. It's not just a thing that occurs in darkest Africa because of whatever weird theological dodge people who don't believe in the gifts for today or whatever come up with.
Right.
Oh, that's needed out on the mission field, but not here. Look, America's a godless nation, man. We need miracles as much as anybody. Good grief.
Yeah.
So
I do love how people can never get away from invoking the magic Negro. Like, people in Africa, like you see it all the time. Like, oh, well, it's Africa. They do the.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, that's very true.
It's even in the Matrix. You know, like the Oracle is this black lady.
I know.
Over and over again, it's always this. Maybe they are magic. You know, Black Girl Magic was a whole political slogan.
It's so funny because it's like, it's also that's a very deeply racist thing to say.
But you know,
when you think about it, like, it's like, no, God needs to help. God needs to heal the Africans because, you know, they're savage. But we're good.
They don't know how to do medicine, so they have to have a.
But we're fine. We've got hospitals, so we don't need miraculous healing.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's such a weird.
Now, you said you had 2 questions. What was your other question?
You said you speak in tongues. What is that about?
Oh, that's a great question.
Because my closest thing, I've never had any speaking in tongues. Like I said, I have one friend who's been on this show before, Ruckus from ACR, Alternate Current Radio, who occasionally has fits where he goes into a hypnotic state and speaks in tongues. And this was brought about by a Bigfoot encounter, which is very weird.
That, I will agree with you. That is very weird.
That's the one case of glossolalia that we have done on the show. And then two, I used to go to a church where the pastor said one time in passing, he said, we were reading that passage, Paul talks about the tongues. And he goes, I'll tell you that some people here speak in tongues, but they don't do it in the service. And he never extrapolated. He said, precisely because we don't have anyone that interprets it.
Interesting. Oh, well, he's at least keeping the requirements that Paul lays out there, right?
When you speak in people, I've met so many people that say, well, look, this was just something that happened at Pentecost, and that means that people miraculously suddenly started speaking other human languages.
Oh, yes, right, of course. And so it's a translation. It's yeah, okay, yeah.
So what is it to you, and what does it mean, and what do you do? What's happening?
Sure. Well, like, again, because I'm not a cessationist, right? So a person that's a cessationist, they would believe, no, these things stop in Acts. They can't tell you exactly where in Acts they stop, and they have trouble explaining why they stop in Acts, but they also show up in some of the epistles. And, I'm being mean, but also they've been very mean to me on the internet, so I'll crack. I was talking to another Substack person, and he said there's nobody on Substack that's still fair game to just deeply disrespect and bully except low church charismatics.
Yeah.
Because we are kind of like the low class. It's very much a class thing. It's seen as like, yeah, you're the dirty hick people who like handle snakes probably and stuff. And it's always been very sad to me because oftentimes it's a mischaracterization of like what people think and teach. You know what I mean? In the same way that I'm sure if you're Catholic, you hear some people talk about Catholics, and you're like, I don't even think that. What are you talking about? I'm sure the same thing happens, all the time for everybody. But no, so if you're a cessationist, you believe that these things have stopped, and you will talk about the what happens at Pentecost, which people speaking different tongues. Is like, see, because it says we understand them in their languages, this wasn't a prayer language thing. It was a translation of different languages thing, and it was just for evangelism, and that's not necessary anymore.
Right.
That doesn't make sense to me because, number one, it would be quite necessary nowadays, even for evangelism, so I would still pray for it. And number two, there are clearly other experiences that can be had because Paul talks about you speak in the tongues of angels. He talks about that it can be a private experience.
So I speak in the tongues of angels, right? Yeah. Right.
In fact, he says specifically that it more often is a private experience, a personal edification between you and God, and that if it's going to edify the body, it needs to be done in a certain way, in a certain setting, so that it can be edifying.
Right.
He actually kind of leans on it as like he says, in fact, Paul says, I speak in tongues more than all of you.
Right.
So we know that Paul experienced speaking in tongues, and he said, but when I'm in a group of people, I'd much prefer to be given the gift of prophecy. I think this is fascinating because, number one, Paul is very clear. He says, I do not forbid tongues and do not forbid prophecy. I find that amazing that people read that and they say, so what we're going to forbid is tongues and prophecy. That makes sense. But number two, I think it's very interesting that we never even talk about prophecy, which is another gift that I not only have seen, but I have experienced, have received before. And that's the one that's even weirder in my view. Like, I think that it's so interesting that Paul kind of says, look, tongues is fine, but prophecy is the one you should pray for.
Right.
Because tongues is just kind of a fun, interesting thing, but prophecy edifies. So anyway, what is that? My pastor, who also speaks in tongues, he says tongues is a private prayer language for your edification and for God's glorification, right? Or something like that. So it is a personal, spiritual experience where you run out of words to worship God, and therefore you express yourself in other words. It's the only way I can really describe that to you.
Right.
It's not, here's some things that it's not, because I think people have misconceptions. I am not making up the words.
Sure.
Like I don't have just a set of repeated syllables that I use, and that's a speaking in tongues. Because very often, this is one of the easiest gifts, unfortunately, to be like counterfeited, and will often happen because people are pressured to speak in tongues. As like, I mean, so you just kind of, I guess I got to say
I
something.
gotta bring them so you just go like that.
And there you go. Here's the thing, right?
Right.
And so it's not just a repetitive set of two syllables that I repeat over and over. It's not something that happens when I'm just in a setting chatting with somebody. In fact, I would feel very weird about that because it's a experiential thing. It's when I am in the presence of God in a way that I am aware of in a worship setting when I'm thinking about God and praying to God and worshiping God, and it flows out of that. It's not like just disconnected from that experience.
Uh-huh.
It is not, in most cases for me, something that's intelligible to me. So
Okay,
I'm not sitting there saying, like, oh, what I'm talking about is this.
Uh-huh.
It is, which I believe to me makes sense because it comes from the passage where it says sometimes the Spirit speaks forth groanings unutterable. It's more that kind of thing.
Does it seem like it's an actual language with like syntax and grammar?
That's a really good question.
Or is it something different than that? Like, is it actually a language, quote unquote, that angels might speak?
Oh, that's a great question. Now this is going to be a really interesting, maybe weird answer. I have known people when people first start to speak in tongues, who receive the gift of tongues. Most frequently, this is a thing where somebody will be praying for this, and somebody will, and it's very funny because it's almost very counterintuitive. I'm going to explain to you how I received the gift of tongues in a minute,
Sure.
And it's really kind of weird and like counterintuitive. So like it's not maybe like what you'd think. It's almost a little bit more normal than that, which is kind of funny. So if you first have that experience, what commonly happens is then kind of for the rest of your life, that's sort of a thing that will happen sometimes. And for people who first start doing that, it's very halting, and it's like 1 or 3 or 5 words in my experience.
Right.
And the word I'm going to use, I don't know if this is the right way to talk about it, but it's like as it becomes more developed for you, as you become more comfortable, then it begins to me to sound more and more like, I guess, a language of some kind, because it's not just repeated the same syllables, and it's also recognizable. Me speaking in tongues sounds different from my wife speaking in tongues, sounds different from my pastor speaking in tongues. It's like it's different things.
Right. Do you think if we recorded it, you could detect speech patterns reminiscent of languages?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah. I certainly, there's variation to it, but there's also similarities. Like I can hear in myself, I know there are sort of, I don't even want to say syllables, but there are almost phrases or sound patterns.
Like you say the all the time in English. Like
sure. So maybe it's something like that. Yeah. Where it's like, I know that's a thing that I say, but again, I don't have an interlinear tongues to English grammar,
right?
That I know of for me personally.
Sure.
That's because, so number one, I don't personally have the gift of interpretation. I've certainly prayed for that gift. I would love to have that gift, mainly because it would be helpful for me personally. I would be edified by knowing what I was saying.
What am I saying?
Right, it would be nice. So now, that's the thing. So I don't know what I'm saying, but I could definitely tell you the emotional state I was in and what I was responding to.
Okay, yeah.
So I have an idea of like what the topic must be.
Right.
But I don't have the words, right? And so when there are people that do have a gift of interpretation to interpret, we're always quick to explain to people it's interpretation, not translation.
Okay, yeah. So, good distinction.
So you're not necessarily, it's not like you're getting the word for word, or the thought for thought, depending on your biblical translation. You're not getting necessarily that directly downloaded. These are the words that this means.
Right.
It's more like we say, look, if you're concerned about it or you're worried about getting it wrong, share it in the context of, I believe that the word from the Lord is this. Mm-hmm. And what you should expect it to be is, because it's tongues, and it's pretty clear in the Bible that tongues is directed towards God, not towards man. So you should expect that it should be a worshipful utterance from a person to God. You're not expecting a what we call a word of wisdom or a word of prophecy. You're not expecting some speech from God to people. God is saying this to us. I don't think so, because tongues is directed towards God.
Okay.
So it is very typically just a very simple little couple sentences of worship towards the Lord is what is then interpreted. And yeah, so that's because of that, and because most commonly when it's shared, it's just a couple sentences. And I think it's best actually in that context to be that way. I think it shouldn't be long because it becomes difficult for people. It becomes awkward in a certain way. And because it is, I have heard it described as ecstatic speech. I don't know how much I agree with that.
Okay.
Just because if I'm praying and listening to music and stuff and driving to work, I may occasionally speak in tongues.
Uh-huh.
Not as often as I would like. I probably should do that more often. But I can still drive the car.
Right. You're not in an altered state of consciousness.
Not per se. I'm not, drunk. I'm not, I'm not incapacitated. But I understand why people say ecstatic speech because it's definitely a heightened state. I'm not. It's not a thing that just slips into my normal conversation. It's not a thing that I'm very focused and very spiritually perceptive at that time. So I can see why people would say it, but it's not a thing where it's like you get zapped on the top of your head and your eyeballs roll back in your head and another voice pours out of your mouth and then you wake up and you go, oh, what just happened? Like that's not what happens. That's a different thing. You should probably call a priest. Yeah, so that's what that experience is like, for me and for most of the people at our fellowship and any Calvary I've ever been in, which I've very commonly seen that be the case. We don't do that in a service like on Sunday or whatever.
Yeah.
Because it's distracting. So that'll commonly be in a prayer setting, like a prayer service after, what we call an afterglow, I guess. It's just like a setting where we're just praying and sharing together, or privately, is more common. I think it's even more common in the New Testament. I'd argue that's a private thing.
Right.
Did I miss a question that you had? I'm sorry.
No, that's perfect. I just find the topic of speaking in, I ruminate on what language is a lot because, this whole idea of like the world is made through the word and like identifying Christ with the logos. And then like we have speech and the different, there's something very, very, I really do. I think on some level the world is made out of language. I don't quite know what that means. But I think language is more fundamental than like particles or whatever to the material world.
Well, and also language is we're very uniquely language people as Christians because we're people of the book.
Right.
Right. So it's like God, as a slogan for my pastor, God could have given us anything, right? But he gave us a book. So God apparently cares about conveying not just in feelings to us or in impressions, but he communicated in language. He said, this is the words that I want you to have. So that must be important to us in some way, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
And like speaking the world into existence, the power to name the animals, all this.
Right.
And so I find the topic of like language and this idea, the dream for me is, as it was probably for Lewis, I think he even mentioned, is the idea of like the twilight language, the language of the birds, the language of what was spoken in Eden or whatever. Like if in the last Space Trilogy book, that guy has the ability to speak in that language that is.
Oh yeah, and he speaks to Mr. Multitude. Yeah.
And it like creates things as he's speaking, kind of idea.
Right.
I've always found that idea very seductive, and I don't know. Speaking in tongues gets to some. I don't know. If there was one thing I could really quite understand, it would be that one. But everyone I ask is like, well, I don't really know how it works. It just kind of.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's kind of funny. Like that was a late breaking thing in my life, like where I was actually encouraged by someone else. Have you thought of praying for this? I said, no, I've not thought of that. Like, why would I do that? And not out of a resist, but just like, why? And they said, well, maybe you should do that. And I was kind of like, kind of bullied into it almost by my pastor. He's like, this is a good thing. Like, you need to, And I think I was coming out of this faux humility.
Yeah.
Like this false modesty of like, oh, I don't really need that. And I found it to be an incredibly edifying, I think I'll use the word practice, I guess.
Okay.
Although to practice, I would have to be more diligent. But yeah, I would call it it's a.
Do you do it on command? Like, could you just do it at any moment? Or is it something that has to come over you like you have to be inspired?
Closer to on command than you'd think.
Okay. Interesting.
Where not in the sense that like, but it's not, the Bible says the spirits of the prophets are subject to the prophets. So it's not like a thing where I have to be zapped, you
Right.
know? I like to explain it. It's an overflow of emotion. It's an emotional thing. It's not like a coldly rational thing. It's an internal overflow of emotion directed Godward,
Okay.
where I am having the spiritual experience with the Lord, and it just kind of gets to a point where I have run out of words to express or describe that experience.
Mm.
And then in that moment, I am able to just speak out, and it does not feel like I'm formulating or prefiguring or in the way that I speak to you, I think about the next sentence I'm going to say, and it's like a speech act kind of thing that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And tongues is not that. It's it's an utterance that comes from a different place other than my mind.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, why it's so. I'll just use the word edifying, like, to me, because that's a spiritual practice and not a physical practice. It's not just me intellectually praising God.
Right.
It almost is like you get to hotwire that part of you and experience something different that's much closer to just a spiritual experience, which is very different, than we usually have in our modern kind of world, and one that I think is missing from so many Christians. I feel so. I tell people all the time, this is why I'm still in the church tradition I'm in. I would never go back to a time trying to be a Christian before I had these experiences in my life. I couldn't imagine that.
Yeah.
Because it was so joyless and it was so deadening and so burdensome to try and walk with God without all of those things, without that knowledge and that connection and that emotional component to me walking with God. It's like I was really grumpy. And you kind of talked about this with your thing on Joel Osteen, which I love that article, by the way. Just this idea that we get so separated from the fact that, like, God really does love us and really, really desires to care for us. And the spiritual gifts are a way of, again, it's a gift.
Right.
So it requires a kind of humility to receive a gift.
Sure.
It requires you didn't earn. It's not spiritual
People
wages.
hate getting gifts even from other people.
Yes,
like,
now
I feel I have to give you one.
Yes, it's an obligation. It's a spiritual. It's a gift. Yeah, it's hard to It's something that God picked out for you specifically.
Yeah.
Like, all the connotations apply, right? It's and you can receive multiple ones, and he wants you to use them. Yeah. You're a dad, like, you'd be freaking bummed if you went and got something for your kids and they were like, thanks, but I'm just going to kind of leave that over here. Like, you wouldn't love that. Like, that wouldn't be, I don't want to overuse it. Like, you wouldn't be jazzed. You'd be like, oh my gosh, like, that cost me something. And the spiritual gifts are actually spoken of as spoil that's removed from, like, God's plunder that he takes from the prince of the power of the air and then gives out to his sons because of the fact that now that he's died and been resurrected and has ascended to the right hand of his Father. We just talked about this on our podcast at the church yesterday, which is why I'm able to just dome this right now. In a sense, it's like you're receiving the distributions of his victory, which is directly how they're spoken about in the New Testament. It's like, I'm giving you these things because I won.
Right.
Like, this is here, you get this and you get that. And that's me giving out this largesse, this beneficence, because I'm the victor,
Right.
And that puts it in this different light of like, oh, wow, in exercising this, I'm honoring that. And I wouldn't want to not do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. Fascinating.
Oh, it's fun stuff.
Yeah.
I've never seen Bigfoot, though.
Yeah. So that's probably where have you ever had a UFO encounter?
Do you, the closest, it's late, we can tell this story. The closest to a UFO encounter I've ever had in my life. I don't know that I personally believe in UFOs, UAPs, anything like that. I certainly believe in demons. But the closest I've ever had to something like that So we were joking about the desert, right? But you do
Right.
know that the desert in Christian tradition is a very spooky place.
Yeah. It's where all the spirits live. Yeah.
It's where the demons are, right? Exactly.
Right.
Which I think is so funny how we've got this tradition of like back to the landers now with Christianity, which like Christianity is a city thing, bro. Like we've always been on that. Like we stay in cities. That's where we go. But anyway, so the desert has always been this place, back to St. Anthony of like, yeah, you don't mess around out there. And my dad is an avid fisherman. And if you want to fish in New Mexico, table stakes, you're driving for 3 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, it's just like to get to anywhere. So you seem like you were familiar with New Mexico. Have you ever been to do you know the Rio Grande Gorge?
Of course.
Okay. So we're talking. Okay. So the gorge has, of course, a little river down at the bottom. I forget what the name of it is. And it's one of the most picturesque places I've ever been.
Yeah,
it looks like you're just, and it's New Mexico, so flat as a board, and then it looks like an angel just ripped a hole in the ground with a sword. Like it's just like a gash in the ground straight down. And you hike down this little switchback trail miles down in, or felt like miles at the time when I was younger. This is a ways. And you get down to the bottom and you can fish that river. So we're at the top. I don't want to know what ungodly time we woke up, but we're at the top before shooting light. I mean, it's like early. It's like 5 in the morning. Gray dark. And I'm there with my dad and one of my brothers and one of my dad's employees from the business he ran at the time, who we'd always go fishing with. Now, when you're young, you see things all the time, right, that you can't explain.
Correct.
And the things that you can't explain when you're young, they almost fit into this like world theory of like, well, I can't explain anything. I'm dumb. Like, I don't know. Right. So who cares? But so you always are looking to like adults basically to give you like a theory of like, is this a real thing or a bad thing or whatever? So I am looking down at very, very early, morning light, and I see what I can only describe. At the bottom of the gorge, there is a figure running flat out as fast as I felt like I had ever seen anybody run. And behind him is trailing what looks like from the distance we're at, like a little tattered, like black, like cape.
Wait, is the cape chasing him or is it attached to his shoulders like
Superman? Oh, I'm sorry. I should be very clear. Yeah, he's not. The cape is not floating. That's an important detail. Yes. So this person is wearing. I don't know if it's a man, woman,
There's
whatever.
A figure running wearing a cape at the bottom of the gorge.
At the bottom of the gorge at 5 in the morning. So, and they run along.
That may have just been one of my friends. I don't know.
Yes. Well, no, wait till the end of the story. It may have been several people. I could definitely
see one of the people I know doing it. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I believe you. It could have been all kinds of things. So this person runs flat out all the way down the little trail from the one end to where they disappear around one of the corners, and we can't see them anymore.
Sure.
And so, of course, me, I'm like a kid. I'm worried, and I look at my dad, and I've never seen my dad look like that in my life ever before or since.
Right.
And he's just freaked, and my dad's friend is freaked, and then of course both of us are like, "Oh shoot!"
You all see it, not just you.
Oh, no, yes, okay. This is like all, and we all see it, and then we all just sit there like, "What are we talking about here?" Like that was weird, and I don't know why. Again, when you have one of those experiences, like you don't know why it's weird. It's a person. Like who freaking cares?
Right.
But it was so eerie, and so. We never.
There's a supernatural element of it right then because the terrain down there is not suited for running flat out.
No, because it's river rock. You're correct.
It's river. It's like rocks. There's things that someone doing that is either extremely athletic,
right,
or floating above the ground slightly.
Spooky, right?
Yeah, right.
And not only that, I will tell you that we went down. Because my dad wasn't going to waste a good fishing day.
Yeah.
So we climbed our sorry butts down into the gorge. We fished all day up and down the river for, I would guess, a couple miles in each direction and never saw anybody. Nobody down there, no camp, no nothing. That's the weird part to me is like, so where did you go? Like how were you there at 5 in the morning and then didn't have a camp that you went back and packed up? Like, again, there's explanations for all this. I have no idea what we may or may not have seen, right?
Right.
But I'm 100% a huge believer in spiritual. Obviously, as we just talked about for an hour and a half, I believe in all those things. I believe in you know, spirits, both good and bad, because I think Scripture talks about those. I'm a big Michael Heiser guy, Unseen Realm, very good
Right.
book. So, but of course, now here's the kicker, because that's the fun version of the story that I tell. Years later, I tell my grandpa this, who used to live with us out in New Mexico, and he gets real quiet on the phone, and he goes, "Oh," he said, "you saw Jeffrey Epstein."
What?
Yeah, yeah. And I said, I'm sorry, come again? What are you talking about? And he said, "You saw Jeffrey Epstein." I said, Get out of here. What are you talking about?" And sure enough, some of you may or may not be familiar, Jeffrey Epstein possessed a very significant piece of land in New Mexico, which it was a large ranch that he owned, and was apparently known to ride around the countryside dressed as Zorro.
Okay.
Now, right. Now, am I telling you that I saw Jeffrey Epstein running down the bottom of the Rio Grande Gorge at 5 a.m. dressed as Zorro? No, I don't. I don't even think that's what I saw. But it is a little spooky.
Yeah.
That's the immediate connection my grandpa made, who he knew people who would have known, like because he was known at the time as being, oh, that's that weird guy that has that massive ranch. I think he
Right.
called it Zorro Ranch or something, which was
Right.
again one of those places where unfortunately he would just have parties and invite people and things like that. So yeah, man, I don't know whether I felt better when I thought that story was about a vampire or about Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not sure which one feels more like a spooky encounter, but
Yeah.
that's the one time in my life that I've ever been relatively sure I had reached what the Celtic people call a thin place, huh? Like,
Yeah. Well, that's what I love about New Mexico. It's maybe my favorite state, although I don't live there. They call it Land of Enchantment, like on their slogan.
They do, yeah.
Every
do.
state's got a slogan. And if you're out there in the middle of nowhere by yourself, like literally the middle of nowhere, in a way that you aren't in most of the rest of the country,
correct.
it's like weird. Things get weird. Like I start feeling eyes on me, like in the hills, like hills have eyes. It's like something's out here. It's like, this is spooky.
Oh, that's 100% accurate. And I don't have a theory, like I don't have a Christian metaphysical theory for that, other than that I do truly believe that we have good traditional indication that we don't live in a place where it's just us.
Yeah.
And that there's something about I think it's Anthony that talks about this, that he said that he believed that the demons were out in the desert because Christians were in the city. They were all together, and that there was something powerful spiritually about the fact that they were together and that they were worshiping God, and that was a place where they were gathered, and the demons avoided that.
Right.
And they liked being in waste places. And that's even biblical too, because in Scripture you have the demon possessed man in the tombs.
Yeah.
Who he gets driven out into the wilderness, and Jesus is driven out by the Holy Spirit into the wilderness and is tempted by
Satan. That's where you meet the devil. You go out into the wilderness.
Yeah, you're right.
Right.
There's something to that, yeah. And no, I 100% agree with you that there's something about, because New Mexico also has Skinwalker Ranch, right?
Yeah.
Which
no joke. In the middle of the New Mexican desert at night, you stand a high chance of meeting some form of the devil.
I'd be willing to.
Camping out there, it gets spooky.
It does, and we didn't spend a lot of time overnight, which is probably good. But no, there's encounters, and I think there's something about, anyway, it's a fun time. It's an interesting place. I had one other New Mexico thing I wanted to, because you were talking about Land of Enchantment and we were talking about Jeffrey Epstein. I don't remember. It is a great, I miss the food.
Yeah.
There's definitely some delicious food, but like you said, there's something to be in a place where you can go. That's the thing that people in the East don't understand, that you understand because you've been out there and you've actually walked. Like, that's the thing, not just being in Albuquerque, but like camping or being out.
A place where back before, I mean, it's probably not this way now, but when I drove out there the first time, you hit scan on the radio to look for stations.
Yes.
And you would hit scan on the highway, and it would just go round and round and find nothing. Like there's
correct.
There's nothing. There's not even a radio signal to pick up. You're so alone.
There are places, and this is what people in the East don't even understand.
A road sign that says "last gas for 150 miles," and you're like,
yes, I remember those signs. That's what I was about to say. Is there are places in many areas in New Mexico where you could start walking, and if you don't turn around, you'll die.
Exactly. Oh yeah.
Like you'll
You
just
won't hit
you will
anything.
not make it.
Yeah.
Or you'll meet, a skinwalker or a Wendigo or some one
Yeah.
of those, But yeah, no, there's some remote areas out there. It's very sparsely populated.
But
Yeah, very very beautiful. If you like the moon,
if you like the moon, I went it's not New Mexico, but out in Arizona.
uh
We were out there one time, and I didn't see it at the time, but when we developed the picture, it was the pictures that you like disposable cameras.
yeah, yeah,
When I got the pictures back, there was a UFO like in the photos, but at the time it was this place where there's no features to reflect sound back to you,
sure.
and so you could speak, and if the person wasn't standing right in the direction of your face, you couldn't hear them. It's like
Whoa.
Yeah, because they're like when we're around most things, there's like stuff to make echoes and bounce sound.
To reflect it. Yeah.
Zero bouncing of sound.
That's crazy.
And so like you'd have to point your voice at the person for them to hear you. Otherwise, it was just like you just see their mouth moving and you hear nothing, and it was so upsetting.
Yeah, that's very odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I there's probably no other place I've ever been to that was just like New Mexico. Except, well, have you ever been to Israel?
I've not been to Israel.
Okay, so I used to go a lot because I worked for a nonprofit that my dad worked for, and he was over 2 or 3 times a year for a number of years. And so I've been a lot of times. There are places, first of all, there are places in Israel that look just like New Mexico, which is very weird.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Very similar. Secondly, there are places in Israel that have very much that same eerie quality right around the Dead Sea.
Right.
That just looks like the moon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like being on another planet. It's so
Right.
bizarre. It's so eerie. You certainly get the something's watching me feeling there for sure, 100%. Also, you just get the feeling in Israel, and this is a very common. I'm not the first, but like you know what Jerusalem syndrome is?
Oh, is that like Paris syndrome?
Maybe it's but in Jerusalem in a different place. It's this thing that many people when they go to Jerusalem they experience like a discombobulated mental state where they start believing that they're
you believe you're Jesus or Moses
Jesus or some saint or I'm a prophet of some kind. It's like very common.
Yeah. That's probably why I shouldn't go, to be honest. I feel like I'd be susceptible to that. I'd be over there and be like, I'm John the Baptist.
I'll just say it's a very live area.
Yeah.
You're not, it's a hot range. You know what I mean by hot range?
Yeah.
Like it's stuff's happening, Right. So I definitely had I never had any kind of like, I don't know. I've never had a demonic encounter in my life. I've never seen anybody who's possessed. I've never I know people who have. I have lots of people, we were joking, but I know a guy who used to do ministry in Ghana and he told me all kinds of stories. But I've never had that, but I have definitely felt both a unique connection to spiritual, like to benign spiritual forces and dark spiritual forces when I was in Israel in a way that I have not experienced anywhere else, where it was like you were aware that there were other people's the wrong term, I guess, theologically. Other things were there around you, watching you, and sometimes you would have that feeling that these are good and they're protective and they desire you to watch over you, and there's other times where you didn't have a good feeling.
Right.
And some of that was in connection with the call to prayer, but that's a different story for another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jerusalem reminds me of this is so cliche to say. When you watch Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
And one of the scenes where they kind of come back to Minas Tirith and they open up the door and they're kind of like walking up these like hilly kind of like streets with the horses and everything. It just reminds you of that. And I don't even mean visibly, it's like spiritually. I don't know what that means. I have no understanding. I can't explain it any better to you. It spiritually feels like that. I'm not sure what that means. But it's a very interesting city.
I would
I
like
haven't
to
been-
go, but of everyone I know, I'm probably most susceptible to thinking that I'm become Muhammad or whatever.
Oh dear. Well, just stay out of you just gotta stay out of the
I would come
tourist
back with
traps.
golden tablets and be the new
Oh
Joseph Smith.
dear. Yeah,
It would not be good.
Completely heretical. You've just got to stay out of the tourist traps is the thing.
Mm.
Because if you just go to all that, and I'm not meaning to disrespect anybody, but I'm talking to you and you've been on your Shroud of Turin rant, so I feel like
Yeah.
I'm safe here. But I think if you stay away from like all of the big sites, you know, like the shrine type stuff, not meaning no disrespect to that, but just like the best parts of that are just like go to the Sea of Galilee and be there. Like that's crazy. Like go to Ein Gedi, which is like the location where David was hiding out from Saul. Like we know where it is. It's right there. So
Right.
he would have been seeing that weird little waterfall grotto that's there. And like, you know, go to Masada, go up north and see like the Golan, which is like a beautiful place, like just crazy. Like you see all that stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not that I love old buildings and stuff, but like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Much less meaningful to me. And I think much less able to make susceptible people start having delusions of grandeur.
Yeah.
What you would think.
Yeah, I agree. I always try to go to, you know, everyone says this, but no one does it. Where you want to see like the quote unquote real place and not like the touristy area.
Right.
People say that and they're like, I want to see the real France. Okay, like let's go to the Eiffel Tower. Okay.
Right. What if the real France is a McDonald's?
The real France is a McDonald's. That's the thing,
right? And you don't want that.
The real France is the same as here, but people smell a little worse, and they you know that's they speak French, but they're not doing anything over. They're watching Netflix like everyone else.
It's so true. It's so true.
That's the thing.
The only remedy. Do you travel a lot, or have you traveled a lot?
I used to travel a fair bit. I do not in recent years.
The only thing that I can really think of that helps to do that is my tip to people is like you've got to go buy groceries.
Yeah.
That's all you can do because you can't. You're going to stay at a hotel, so you can't. What are you going to do? You're going to walk probably. Even if you get in a cab, he's going to take you to like one of the 5 restaurants that he knows where it is, and it's tough. And so to me, but if you go get groceries, a grocery store is like a grocery store. That's where people go to get. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a place that the people are using, normal people, the civilians, and you get the fun experience of like, what the heck is this soda? And like, what is this weird thing? And you buy some stuff. Food is a universal thing, so if you know any of the language at all, or if they know English, much more likely. Then they'll tell you. You could ask somebody like, "What the heck is this?" And they'll tell you, or say, "What's your favorite thing?" And they'll give you something.
Right.
And you get this fun little experience of like, "Oh, this is actually how people are living here." Because look, it's the grocery store.
Right.
Which I don't know. Maybe there's another way to do that, but that's the shortcut for me.
Yeah.
Is you just go to a grocery store.
Well, the first time I did it when I was just out of college, I would do it by showing up at people's houses and saying, "Can I stay the night here?"
Oh my gosh. People you knew?
No, just I would show up in a town and be like,
goodness.
"Hello," and then I did that like in New Zealand, for example, and I got to know lovely couple. They said sure, and they made me breakfast in the morning, charged me nothing. I did that several times.
Boy, talk about you got to be in a high trust area, my friend. That is
well.
That is
I think that's the thing is like I'm less trusting now. I wouldn't do that. but then I was like, whatever, you know.
Right.
And,
do you know who John Roderick is?
Oh, I do. Yeah.
So
I mentioned him. Yeah.
So I've been a big All the Great Shows fan.
Oh, me too. Roderick on the Line. I just
of
listened
course.
To yeah.
That's so funny, Yoshi. That's great. It's so rare that I meet somebody that knows. So I've listened to like Roderick on the Line for years, and I used to listen to Back to Work some, and then I listened it would just kind of spread. And I listened to Omnibus for a number.
Back when Merlin Man was Merlin Man.
Right. Well, I don't know who he is now, but
when he was like a personality. That was
right. Yeah, for sure. Right. Where he was like talking exactly, and now it's just them shooting the breeze, which I like. And then I listen to Omnibus. My wife and I fall asleep listening to Omnibus every night. Like that's like what just kind of like what puts me to sleep now. And I always why Roderick on the Line is so fun is he keeps number one, they're very good storytellers, right?
Yeah.
If you guys haven't listened, you should definitely go listen to Roderick on the Line. It's just very good storytellers, very good at this kind of it's a skill to be able to do that, to tell a story in that way.
Sure.
and he's very good at it. But he also, his stories, he's always telling a story about how, he famously he walked through Europe when he was younger and kind of like and did that, like just like hitchhiked and slept hard and kind of was just homeless in Europe. And he always talked about how it was like very weird how like, yes, sometimes people would be so nice, but also you could have like the worst ever experiences.
Yeah.
Where people could just like steal things and you'd have a horrible time.
Well,
But you just, when you mention that, it made me immediately think of like, oh my gosh, like that's kind of like a Roderick's walk through Europe.
Well, I kind of walked across New Zealand. Of course, I had to take a boat across from the Big Island to the South Island because it's not walkable. But I did do that, and I did was like, I would like look at places beforehand on what was available in 2004 or three, and try and find, we didn't have the iPhone.
Your farmers
I go to an internet cafe and look at like, is there anyone that has any sort of room in this area? And like, maybe there would be, maybe there wouldn't. And then I go there like 2 a.m. because your train, if you took a train.
That is crazy.
And I'd knock on the door and I'd be like, hey, are you Sam? And they're like, no, who are you? And like, oh, well, I don't know. Do you know where Sam is? No. Can I stay here? Sure. That sort of thing. Insane.
Well, you're lucky that they don't have the Second Amendment because at least they can't shoot you.
I don't think they would have. They were all very nice people,
Yeah, that's legendarily so.
Yeah, legendarily so. I love these. I haven't been back since then, but I would like to go. But it's like a 17-hour plane ride. It's so long, and you get there, and then you're just there, I had no idea really about where to go. I just was like, I'm gonna start at Auckland and get to the bottom of New Zealand. That was the goal.
Did you make it all the way?
Yeah. Start at the top. Now, I did plane trains. I didn't do planes, but I did trains, a boat. I forget really how, it's sort of a blur how we did it, but I ended up at the bottom part with the big sign that says last stop before Antarctica. And that was, got to the bottom where the little blue penguins are. And then I flew back home, but it was quite a, I did it because they filmed the Lord of the Rings movies. And I was like, I want to go see that. And I was like, well, if I'm there.
That's so funny. I was literally going to ask you, but I didn't want to ask because that sounded like, no, of course not. I had a real reason to go to New Zealand.
No, that was why. And I was at one point in a cave with like hissing eels, which was very. This guy was like, "Hey, come!" This guy was like, "Hey, man, you guys are not from around here." I was like, "No." He's like, "Come on, there's this cave down here. It's got glowworms in it." I was like, "Okay, that's cool." So you
understand that is what the man says before he puts your lights out.
Well, I know. It's like it's got glowworms in it, and then
glowworm cave.
So he gives me a wetsuit, and I'm like, "Okay, this is we're going cave." He's like, "Yeah, I know, but it's wet." Okay, he puts on a wetsuit. We go into this cave. It's so dark, and we get to this part though, and it's like he says, "All right, we'll turn off the lights, look up, and the ceiling is covered in these like glowing dots, like different, like sort of pink and purple, maybe even a little red." But we're standing like waist deep in water. And then I hear this. And I was like, what was that? He's like, don't worry. That's the eels. They hiss. They don't bite. I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, you should have mentioned that before. So I'm standing. I look around and it's this swarming pool of eels. I'm standing in this pool of eels. And they're going,
no, thank you.
They're completely pale because they live underground. They're blind.
No.
It's like, ah!
Oh.
And then he disappears. I don't see him anymore. And then I'm in there like, and then like, he lets me like crawl around for like 5 minutes. And then he comes around the corner, flips on his light, says, I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing with you, make you think you lost me. Just mess. Then he leads me out. But
you understand that like there's definitely a alternate world where that just becomes a scene from like a serial killer movie, right?
I know.
He even asked you to put the wetsuit on. Like that's just prepping you for.
I know.
It
was an amazing experience. I got to see the glowworms and the hissing eels.
Yeah.
And cherry on top, he was the first guy to introduce me to the candy Swedish fish. He said, "Here's some Swedish fish." When we got in the van to leave, and I was like, "Oh, these are wonderful." And he said, "Yeah, they are." And then he told me about. He asked me about. He said, "You know, this." He had this whole. He was very geological minded. He was like, "Well, you know, the reason we got these caves here is because this whole area is made of limestone." And I was like, "Yeah, I happen to know a lot about limestone." And I was like, "Oh yeah, well, you know, the area I grew up in also had much limestone." And then we bonded for like an hour about caves.
Well, you bonded in a cave, literally.
We bonded in a cave, and I grew up in an area that had a cave so large under City Hall was a cave.
Oh no!
City Hall was built on top of a cave that was accessible like a mile away. See, the entrance to, but the hollow of the cave was right under City Hall, and it was so large that you could actually put boats down in the water there, and people would do boat races and stuff. And they put the cave. Yeah,
it's insane.
and it was so you had there would be this. It was like, I mean, it was like an airport hangar size hollow in the ground with like a pond, and people would go down there and they'd have parties and they'd have big lights they turn on, you know, with generators. Terrible because I don't think there was good ventilation.
No.
And they're driving motors around, and I don't think they do it anymore because of that reason. Because people were like, "We're just all standing here in a giant pocket, fuming it up with exhaust."
Not.
But they would race boats around, you know, and stuff. It was, and so we talked about that and life inside of caves. And he's like, "Oh, this," and then we're driving back. And goes, "Oh yeah, that's where the Hobbit houses were." I was like, "Oh yeah, there we go."
Well, you got your whole experience then, plus some.
Yeah, I mean, it was climbed a glacier. That was fun. This other guy was like, "Hey, I do tours that goes up this glacier." I said, "I'll do that." He said, "Well, we're not going right now." I said, "Okay." And then he said, "But if you give me $50 more, just we'll go." You know. So I said, "Fine, yeah, let's go." So he gives me some like spiky cleats and stuff, you know, and we get up this top of this glacier. And at one point I slip and I'm just sliding down, trying to stab into it with my axes, you know, trying to get I wasn't going to fall, but I was just sliding and sliding. It was like a gentle slope and I couldn't get any traction, but it was a fun time. Yeah.
And then you get to the top and he says, "Now put this wetsuit on."
Just put the wetsuit on. We're going in. There was a cave up there actually also, but it was made of ice. I don't know if
that makes sense.
I don't know if you've ever been inside an ice cave, but it's very cool.
I've not been inside a cave made of ice. I was inside a cave in New Mexico. There is a volcanic dome. I forget where it is, but we went. Our one of our co-op teachers took us up there because he was a big geology nut, and there's a cave in there that has ice in the bottom of it all year round for some reason because of like how cool the temperature is down there. I don't remember exactly where that is actually. It's not at Tent Rocks, which I've also been to.
Right.
But it's anyway, it's one of the it's a lot of people go up there because they've got all these weird geological formations because of the lava domes and like the volcanoes kind of eroding and leaving weird stuff behind. So but New Mexico is a crazy geological location. Like so much going on there all the time. So I see it's so rare for me to did you ever listen to Friendly Fire?
I never listened to that. No.
Do you remember Friendly Fire? Oh, now, sadly, of course, rest in peace. You know, due to the untimely cancellation and reinstatement of John Roderick as a person. The highly recommended if you like war movies and you like podcasts. I have laughed very hard at that a number of times. I still listen to all the episodes over and over. They just did a whole show about war movies, and it was very funny. And had John Roderick. He towards the end he would just write these little miniature essays to introduce the movies, and those were always funny too.
I every time I've ever been to Seattle, I'm like, I'm gonna run into him. I bet today. It never happens.
Oh, that would be hilarious.
But
I feel like he'd be the kind of person that would be good to run into.
I'd say, listen, here's my my walking stick from Europe with all the shields of various cities on it. Would you like to discuss it? And we go over, for several hours.
Exactly. He seems like a hail fellow well met. You know what I mean? Like one of those for sure.
But
oh my goodness. Well, what? No, I'm sorry that I didn't don't have any Bigfoot. You know who's a big Bigfoot guy that's on? I have an episode in the can of my old podcast with a gentleman, Chad Brooks, who's on Substack, and we just ended up talking about Bigfoot the whole time. And he's a big cryptid nut. And I never grew up with that, I think, for whatever reason. I think it's like you get, as a kid, you get a starter pack. And I think we got dinosaurs instead of Bigfoot. Is sort of how I think that works.
Yeah. No, I had well, I don't know how I got into Bigfoot specifically. I was always into UFOs and ghosts. And
For sure.
then I got into cryptids after I've told the story on the show before, after I was hiding from the police in Lake Loch Ness at 2 a.m, and I was worried Nessie was gonna eat me. And I was like, this is I was like,
as you do.
And then I was like, cryptids. That I was like, because I guess I was into it before then because I was at Loch Ness because I wanted to see Loch Ness. But I sort of was just kind of like, I didn't believe in it. But at 2 a.m. under a full moon, when you're neck deep in Loch Ness, you're like,
oh, that will make certain things will be more believable. Yes,
like
for
something's
sure.
gonna eat me. There's a monster here, and it's gonna eat me. But yeah.
Accurate.
Thank you for doing this, though. It was very fun. I think
I
really enjoy it.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's genuinely like very rare to, all the stuff that we talked about is, like you said, this is weird stuff that I think a lot of people have like a weird modern antipathy to. So it's nice to be able to just talk about it.
Come up to people. I do this anytime I'm at a party. I say, tell me about the time you saw a ghost. And people will go, 50% of people will immediately start with something. And the other 50 will go, I've never done that. I say, okay, tell me about the time you had a premonition of a piece of clairvoyance. And that almost always gets everybody. That's like 100. That's near 100% of people.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Those two questions. And that really gets the ball rolling.
Well, it's,
that breaks the ice.
Yeah,
Perfect
100%.
icebreaker. Perfect icebreaker. I'll say, tell me about your ghost story. Tell me about the time you were a prophet or whatever. And people love that.
Yeah.
Love it every time.
Good at parties.
All right, man. I will certainly keep in touch. And thank you again. Everyone go start listening to Zack's podcast.
Yeah, we'll do our first episode in a little bit. Right now I'm on Make Clive Lewis Weird Again is the Substack. So having fun. And of course, listen to
Clive
Yoshi
Lewis.
And all the great.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Sorry, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.